Thank you, sir. We heard a lot before lunch from ministers and assistant ministers about the fact that the Jersey Reds were, in their view, unsustainable. So I'd like to ask the minister, what then was the purpose of the funding provided over the summer? Was the purpose to support an orderly wind down of the Jersey Reds, or was it stabilisation funding?
Thank you, sir. The purpose, I think, as I expressed in my answer to Deputy Tadje, the purpose was effectively to create time so that the Reds could either find the funding they needed or they could make preparations, if that wasn't going to happen, for the club to wind down in a more orderly fashion. We didn't know as government which way would be possible, so it was in that sense the club had options. It could explore those options. The government was able to also get information about the club's finances, which was another purpose of that time. There was no one single purpose. There were multiple purposes, but ultimately what was needed by the club to explore those different options and by government to explore its own options was time.
Supplemental question then?
Yes, sir. Would the minister not agree that had there been a sharper focus and purpose for the funding, then perhaps ministers and the club may have been able to avoid the complete debacle of what has happened over the past week?
Thank you, sir. I believe there was quite clear focus at the time. The board of the Reds knew exactly that they were being provided with time that was costing an awful lot of taxpayers' money in order to explore their options, in order to create a sustainable financial future moving forward in the best case scenario. That's what would have happened. That's what I really hoped and wanted to happen. But unfortunately, the board of the Reds were unable to do so, and they were unable to provide government with the confidence that they could do so into the future. So the debacle, as the deputy expresses it, it's been created on the Reds side, sir. Government was doing what it felt it could do to try to keep the Reds and give them the best chances of survival into the future. The Reds weren't able to take those opportunities, and so we have seen the results this week. But that debacle is not of the government's making. That debacle is of the Reds board's making.
Well, Deputy Farnham.
So actually my question was similar to the previous question, so I'll give...
Very well. Connétable St Lawrence.
Thank you, sir. If I may, I'd like to refer the Minister to the Appendix 1 that is attached to the statement that he has made, which gives some idea of the money that has been issued by government to the Reds. But it only goes as far back as 2019. And if my memory isn't playing tricks with me, sir, I'm sure I recall asking a former Treasury Minister, and that was Senator Alan McLean, so it is going back some years ago, how he was able to assess the benefit to the local economy of the money that was being given to the Reds at that time. So I'd like to ask the Minister whether money has been given to the Reds prior to the sums shown here from 2019.
Minister.
Thank you. And can I just clarify an element of the question, sir?
Yes, if it's...
Sorry, with the Constable, is the Constable asking about monies before 2019 up to or after 20?
Yes, sir. I'm trying to identify the sum that has been paid by government in total to the Jersey Reds.
Thank you, sir. And I thank the Constable for her question. And I have a list here of sums that have been paid to the Jersey Reds over the years from 2016. It seems, as I look at this, and I have only recently received this, so I have not had time to analyse it myself, it seems that in 2016, £17,500 was paid in a sponsorship agreement. In 2017, £20,000 was paid for Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture Gold Partnership. So that sounds like a form of sponsorship. I can't be sure. Various smaller amounts were paid in hospitality. And then the largest next amount is 2018, December 2018, £75,000 was paid. Seemingly, there's no narrative, so seemingly as a grant. That another £75,000 was paid in January 2019, so less than a month later. And then our table comes in after that. Well, there was another £50,000 in April 2019 as well. The totals at the bottom here say grants £600,000 plus 370,000 of other items, totaling £970,000 since 2016. But I haven't been able to, I say all this knowing this is the first time my eyes have been set on these figures, and so I apologise if I have in some way expressed these incorrectly.
Thank you. Supplementary say.
Yes.
Thank you. My understanding from speaking to other members who know better than I do is that money has been paid to Jersey Reds since 2012. So my question to the Minister is, will he, before the debate this afternoon, brought by Deputy Farnham, will he please provide to members the sum paid to Jersey Reds by government since 2012, if indeed it does stretch back to 2012. And also, I understand that that Visit Jersey probably made payments to Jersey Reds. That's an arm's length organisation of the States of Jersey. Can he please ask officers to provide us with that information as well? So members, before the debate, P78, should have enough information for us to make an evidence-based decision on what we want to do. Do we want to provide further funding to Jersey Reds, or when we see the bottom line figure, will we make a determination that we think we've actually paid enough taxpayers' money? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I thank the Constable. And I mean, yes, this page here says since 2016, £970,000 in grants, but I do think that's probably missing the two items I mentioned earlier, the sponsorship agreement and the gold partnership, which are £37,500. The numbers I have do not go back beyond May 2016, but I do believe the Constable is entirely correct that Visit Jersey did sponsor, I believe, to the tune of £250,000 a year, Jersey Reds for at least 1 year, if not more. So I believe this number of £970,000 would increase certainly beyond £1 million if that Visit Jersey money is counted as government money. I will do my utmost to provide the figures that the Constable is asking for. I am slightly concerned that as I have asked for figures stretching back as far as possible, I've been given a sheet of paper which goes back to 2016. So I am slightly concerned that I will not be able to get those figures from before 2016. But I will endeavour, as soon as this period of questions is finished, to try to get hold of those.
Deputy Tadier.
So I'd like to ask a question which is about non-financial support that government may or may not have given over the period. And to contextualise, sir, we were aware that it's a tragic coincidence that this last season Jersey Reds has won the championship, but they've not been able to enjoy the major financial fruit of that victory because they're not allowed to compete in the Premiership. Has any of the ministers involved in watching this ever considered getting in contact with the RFU to say that Jersey is a victim of a terrible injustice here, and that if you win a particular league, there should be a presumption that that league, with all the kudos that would come, not just for Jersey Reds, but the island, should be recognised on the national stage, and if not, why not?
Thank you. And I thank the Deputy, sir, for his question. And I haven't thought of asking the RFU about the matter that the Deputy terms as an injustice. I do tend to believe that when you enter a competition and you know the rules, those are the rules. And so the rules in this case would have included the Reds knowing that they couldn't be promoted, no matter how well they did that year, last year. It is, I have to say, as I said in my statement, an incredible achievement to win the championship. But my fear is that achievement cost the Reds their long-term financial sustainability. And I'd also question the Deputy's assertion that the financial benefits of moving into the Premiership. I think as the bankruptcy of 3 Premiership clubs has shown, is that actually the higher you move in rugby, the more expensive it becomes to maintain your level. And certainly in an island where we have a population of 100,000 people, one of the clubs was a London-based club that went bankrupt. London has, 10 million people. Jersey has 100,000. And so I would suggest that it would be likely a far worse financial situation for the Reds had they been promoted to the Premiership.
So I do think it's potentially double standards when we think to what other governments have done intervening on behalf of the business community. One example that springs to mind is low-value consignment relief, which primarily affected one Jersey-based business, and government did intervene to make strong representations to the UK about the changes that were being made there. And it seems a shame to me, and I don't know if the Minister would agree with this, that the same courtesy hasn't been given to Jersey's newest success story, which is Jersey Reds. And does the Minister agree that government could be said to be kicking at this team when they are down?
Thank you, sir. Absolutely not, sir. This government is not kicking this team when it's down. I go back to the fact that this club, in my view, was not managed in a financially responsible manner. And that is why they're in the situation they're in right now. I would also go on to say that I thought at the time when the government did launch legal action against LBCR, as an islander, obviously I had nothing to do with that, I wasn't a member of the States at the time, as an islander I thought that was a complete waste of government money because it was somebody else's tax laws. And so how can we challenge somebody else's tax laws? Now that was my reading as an islander, I had no further information. But my point being that this Council of Ministers cannot be held responsible for decisions made by previous Councils of Ministers. And to make parallels, I think, is unhelpful to everybody.
Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to follow up from Deputy Tadier's question about this perception of contribution versus blame. Will the Minister accept that given that what we've heard is that there's been no economic impact assessment of this team since 2016, yet grants have continued to be given, and we've got to a point in respect of the rules where there's been much press about the RFU having to consider a different model given what's happened to a number of teams, that whether he might consider that this is perhaps not the optimum time to be putting the plug on the team, that perhaps one might well be thinking, okay, that there is more merit, just like when you sometimes have to choose to sell an investment, that there's more merit to actually just saying this is the funding until the end of the season, but that really is it, because we can see a chance that you would get that support at least. And we can see that you have some sort of contribution towards the economy, not that we've done an economic impact assessment since 2016.
Sir, it is so very easy in hindsight to talk about why haven't you done this piece of work or why haven't you done that piece of work. The reality is we were asked to provide urgent funding within, honestly, days, if not hours, of deadlines to pay that into players' wages were coming up. And so, sir, it is very difficult in such circumstances to then go and launch large economic impact assessments. I would also say, sir, that the history that I have seen with my own eyes as Assistant Minister and Minister has shown that the Reds do not listen, or have not listened, I should say. The Reds have not listened at the board level to government saying this is the last time. And so, sir, I would have no faith that if we had continued to fund them through the course of this season to a level that is unknown, because despite the business plan, how would we, if they said we really, really need to hire another coach, or how would we really, really need to hire another player, how would we in government be able to say, no, you can't do that? Because somebody would then have gone out into, oh, if they'd only signed this player in government and let them, sir, they would have won the championship again. I do not believe it is the place for government to be in the running of a rugby club. And I do not believe that when a company has a history of not listening or heeding the advice that government has given it, that government can continue to believe that next time it will hear and heed that advice.
I'm afraid that brings the period of time available for questions now to an end. And we move on to public business. We had originally made a decision at the beginning of the Assembly that we would take the funding for the Jersey Reds at this sitting, and indeed also take Deputy Feltham's amendment. Deputy Scott, you have lodged an amendment as well, I believe. You'll need to ask the same indulgence of the Assembly, both to waive standing orders and to allow it to be taken at the same time as the debate. Do you wish to deal with that now so that members know where they are?
Yes, please, sir. I'd like to draw members' attention to the amendment that I have lodged, the second amendment to Proposition 78, which is the funding for the Jersey Reds. And this seeks to impose a condition should the states approve the funding in terms of seeking that there would be a representative on the board of the company, as we are aware that there are management concerns. So I therefore am requesting that in accordance with Standing Order 80, that Standing Order 32 be suspended, so that the proposition may be listed for debate at the meeting, and I'll subsequently propose, in accordance with Standing Order 26.7, that the minimum lodging period be reduced so that we can debate the proposition along with the main proposition.
Very well. Is that proposition seconded? Yes, sir. Does any member wish to speak? Deputy Farnham?
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to say that I think the amendment is sensible and could be helpful to the propositions. I'm prepared to accept it and have the
So you would indicate that
read
you would
as
be
amended.
prepared to accept the proposition, yes, the amendment when it comes? Very well. Does anyone else wish to speak? Those in favour of allowing the suspending standing orders and allowing the amendment to be debated together with the main proposition, kindly show. Those against?
Could we ask for the appel?
We'll have the appel, I think. Thank you very much. I think that's essential. The vote is on whether or not we allow the suspension of standing orders and the foreshortening of the lodging period to enable Deputy Scott's amendment to Deputy Farnham's proposition to be debated at the same time as Deputy Farnham's proposition, the funding of the Jersey Reds. Mr. Greffier to open the voting and members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their vote. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The proposition is adopted. 29 votes for, 12 votes contre.
Can I have the 12, please?
Those members voting contre, the Connétable, St Bernard and Trinity, and deputies Ayer, Gardner, Gorst, Moore, Balash, War, Renouf, Ferry, Alex Curtis and Stevenson.
Very well. The amendment will be taken at the same time as the main proposition. We now move on to the public business as... Yes, sir.
Sir, may I propose that we bring forward the debate on the Jersey Reds so that then we can get on with the rest of business? It strikes me, having spent the morning discussing Jersey Reds, etc., that we are in a position where we now understand, and rather than leaving it for hours or till tomorrow, that this may be a better time to take it.
It's a matter for the Assembly. That's a proposition you make. Is that proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak?
Yes, sir.
Connétable St Lawrence?
Thank you, sir. I don't feel, without the bottom line figure that I asked the Minister to provide, that the debate can really go ahead. I understand that we're full of Jersey Reds. We've read the proposition from Deputy Farnham. We've looked at the amendments, and we're keen to get on with it, and the public is keen to hear our decision. But we should be making our decisions based upon evidence, or as much evidence as we possibly can have. And I have not seen anywhere a figure that indicates to me the final figure that this government or the taxpayer has paid in support of the Jersey Reds. And the Minister read out numbers a few moments ago. I didn't write them down. I don't know if anyone else did. I have not seen the total or anything that is anywhere near potentially the total. So I do wonder whether it is advisable to go ahead now or whether it would be better to wait until the end of the other public business to allow the Minister's officers the time to do some research and try to come up with the evidence that I believe we should all have in front of us before we make another potentially financial decision to support the Reds, if that is clear. So, and I see Deputy Farnham as the proposer of P78 nodding in agreement, sir. So,
I beg your pardon, I thought you finished, Colin. I apologise. Deputy Tadier.
So could I give way to Deputy Farnham first? It might be helpful to hear what he's going to say. That's fine.
Deputy, you can speak in the order that you've put the light on, I'm afraid. If you want to resign your position to speak, then you may be able to flash a light later, but...
Yeah. I don't think that's likely to happen, sir. The gesture was there anyway, so let it not be said that I'm not a gentleman on occasion, sir. So I look at it from a slightly different angle. I think everything the Constable of St Lawrence said is correct, but I'm also mindful of two things that we should also consider. So on the one hand, it seems to be convenient for ministers to debate this because they're on a high. We know that the Economic Development Minister is on top of his brief. He's got a very clear position about what he thinks should happen. But the first point is that we know there's a lot of public interest in this and that there have been supporters of the Jersey Reds have made their way down to the Royal Square, and they were labouring, I think, on the understanding that this would be the last item of business. It's entirely conceivable that they've arranged their days in order to go to work and come back to listen to the debate, which may well be sometime later today. But I think the second point is that it's not right to reorganise business. Essentially, we've allowed this to be taken and as a courtesy, and I think it's right given the public interest, but then to start moving things that have just been added to the order paper to the front of the order paper, when clearly this is a matter, I think, that could wait till the end of the day, doesn't seem right. Not also adding to that fact that there is new information that we're still waiting to hear from about financial implications, and I would say the non-financial implications that we also need to understand about funding Jersey Reds or otherwise, sir. So I think for all of those reasons, we should leave it where it is on the order paper.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Farnham.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to concur with the previous two speakers. This morning, we did agree to take it as the last item on the agenda. The proposition was brought with short notice. I know some members I've spoken to have asked for a bit more time to examine the appendixes attached to my proposition, sir. And I'm also still compiling some facts and figures, so I strongly recommend we stick to the earlier plan and wait, give as much time for members to study as much of the information as possible and deal with it at the last item. Thank you.
Any other member wish to speak? I close the debate. Did you wish to respond, Deputy Wright?
Thank you, sir. I was throwing it there as an option and also aware kind of differently. It's funny how people can have such different views on the same thing. Precisely because the public were in the Royal Square, I thought they might be wanting to get to understand the result of it so sooner rather than later. I must say to the Constable that whilst I have already instructed officers to get me these figures, I am concerned that we won't find those figures. That is a genuine concern. And so I wouldn't put too much weight on that as evidence that we'll get, but I can give you the sum of £970,000 as a minimum that has been provided to the Reds. I believe it goes far beyond that, and obviously there is also sums of £457,000 owed to government as well, as well as other monies to other parties that haven't been repaid. But it's in the hands of the Assembly, sir. I thought the option was worthwhile mentioning.
Well, a vote in favour is the appel is called for, and the vote for is a vote to take the item of business immediately. A vote against is a vote to leave it on where it currently sits on the order paper, and I ask the greffier to open the voting. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. And the proposition is defeated. 10 votes pour, 32 votes contre, 1 abstention.
10, please.
The 10 members voting for the Conotab of St Bellard, Deputies Morell, Gorst, Renouf, Rose Binet, Jearn, Tom Binet, Ferry, Alex Curtis and Stevenson.
Very well. The first item of public business is the draft register of names and addresses amendment Jersey Law, P56, lodged by the Chief Minister. The main responder is the Chair of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Register of Names and Addresses Amendment Jersey Law 2000, a law to amend the Register of Names and Addresses Jersey Law 2012 to permit the supply of certain information to credit reference agencies and for connected purposes. The states, subject to the sanction of His Most Excellent Majesty and Council, have adopted the following law.
Chief Minister.
Deputy Miller is the rapporteur, sir.
Deputy Miller.
Thank you, sir. Sir, as many members will be aware, in recent times there has been increased concern over the decline in credit card providers providing credit cards to islanders. We've all heard reports about people not having credit cards renewed at their expiry date and not being granted new credit cards. Through our discussions with banks, we understand that one critical and common barrier to the provision of credit cards in Jersey is the absence of a central electoral roll which can be searched by credit reference agencies to provide information about customers. This information is key to supporting the onboarding of applicants, both for address verification checks required under money laundering requirements and for affordability checks. The solution proposed through this proposition will enable government to deliver to credit reference agencies in a secure manner information similar to that contained on the electoral roll to meet these purposes. The value of the proposition is not, however, limited to the issue of credit cards. Government has recently conducted a consultation on proposals for a new consumer credit regime. This will seek to implement necessary protections for consumers when entering lending arrangements, including, it's proposed, the requirement for lenders to perform affordability checks. The use of credit reference agencies has been acknowledged by a number of lenders as important to support delivery of this step. Beyond the delivery of credit products, financial institutions, including banks, are working to deliver digital platforms for processing customer applications with a view to improving efficiency and accuracy. The use of information held by credit reference agencies through already established processes will support banks and other lenders in the delivery of these platforms and hopefully bring the benefits of more streamlined processes to islanders. The Register of Names and Addresses Jersey Law 2012 established the requirement for the Chief Minister to maintain a register of certain facts about individuals who require to register under the control of Housing and Work Law. This register is used within government to support its operations, including the administration of social security benefits and pensions. The current use of the register is, however, limited by law to use by public authorities and does not currently allow for sharing with other organisations such as credit reference agencies. The proposed amendment to this law will establish a new statutory purpose and use for the register such that the information can be provided to credit reference agencies subject to fulfilment of certain conditions. Sir, before I move on to discuss the amendment, I would just like at this point to recognise the work done by Jersey Consumer Council in identifying the scale of this particular issue and its campaigning work with both of the banks and us to try to find the reasons and the solutions to the problem. So if I move to the amendment, this proposition will permit the supply of limited and specific information, namely a person's name, address and date of birth, to prescribed credit reference agencies. This will be limited to persons resident in Jersey who are 18 years of age and above. The proposition imposes specific purposes for the supply of information, limiting this to, firstly, enabling persons to meet money laundering obligations, such as customer due diligence verification procedures, vetting an application for credit, and performing statistical analysis of credit risk assessment where the individual has not been identified. It also imposes conditions upon the Chief Minister to ensure the supply of information is limited to credit reference agencies that are subject to authorisation, that is regulation, equivalent to that of the UK, and data protection laws equivalent to Jersey's data protection law. The proposition also allows for a fee to be charged to credit reference agencies for access to the register. The model and value will be established by subsequent order. Sir, I move the principles. Thank you.
Are the principles seconded? Does any member wish to speak on the principles? No member wishes to speak on the principles. Those in favour of adopting the principles kindly show. Those against? The principles have been adopted. Deputy Mezek, does the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel wish to call on that?
It's the Economic and International Affairs panel that scrutinised this.
Well, does the panel wish to call matters in?
No, we don't, sir. We've actually filed comments on the proposition, and it would be useful to know a bit more about what happened in the consultation, but I'm sure the Minister will respond. Thank you.
Very much, Deputy. Well, then we move to second reading. How wish do you propose the articles?
Sir, I could provide a little bit of information about the consultation, if that would be helpful.
It's entirely a matter
But
for
just
you.
very briefly, the consultation was open. It was a public consultation, and it was open between the 17th of July and the 25th of August. The consultation ran in parallel with the lodging of the proposition because we were trying to deal with this as a matter of some urgency, given the concerns around credit card provision. The consultation received relatively strong engagement from the public, with 126 responses, 85% of whom were supportive of the proposal. A number of those who were neither supportive or not supportive identified that their views were conditional on necessary data security safeguards being delivered. So data protection were a very important aspect of these propositions. They have been discussed with the Office of the Information Commissioner, who has not raised concerns, and officers will continue to work with the Commissioner as the proposals are developed. In practice, we're satisfied that data protection issues will all be covered. So, thank you. Sir, may I propose the regulations en bloc, please?
Are they seconded en bloc?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the regulations or any of them? All right. Thanks very much for the contribution to the Greffiers Fund. Not silent enough, Conatara. Those in favour of adopting the proposition in second reading, kindly show. Those against? The articles are adopted. Do you move the matter in third reading?
Yes, please, sir.
Is it seconded for third reading?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak in third reading? Those in favour of adopting the matter in third reading, the appel is called for. Invite members to return to their seats. The vote is adoption in the third reading, and I ask the greffier to open the voting. Members have had the opportunity of casting their vote. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The proposition has been adopted. 44 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstention. Very well. The next item of public business is the draft employment amendment number 14 Jersey Law, P62, lodged by the Minister for Social Security. The main respondent will be the chair of the Health and Social Services Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Employment Amendment Number 14 Jersey Law 2000, a law to amend further the Employment Jersey Law 2003. The states, subject to the sanction of His Most Excellent Majesty and Council, have adopted the following law.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. When Deputy IA lodged P70/2021, he sought to enshrine legal rights to time off work for parents affected by the tragic death of a child. Deputy IA's proposal took its lead from the then recently introduced Jack's Law in the UK, a law that came about following campaigning by the parents of Jack Hurd. And whilst no amount of time off work or financial compensation will ever make up for the devastating impact the loss of a child might have, I hope we all agree that government does have a role in ensuring that parents are supported in these tragic circumstances. Deputy IA's proposition received unanimous support from the Assembly, and now these changes to the island's employment law will, if adopted, see those rights made a reality. This amending law will create a new statutory entitlement to parental bereavement leave under Article 55HA of the Employment Law. Working parents will be entitled to 2 weeks unpaid leave from their employer after the date of death of a child under 18 years of age, and that will include a child that is stillborn after 24 weeks of pregnancy. The leave can be taken at any time up to 56 weeks from the date of the death, and can be taken in up to 3 separate periods, with each period being of any amount of time and with no requirement for the parent to give the employer notice of taking parental bereavement leave. So the leave has been structured in that way because parents, although there is 2 weeks, parents may, it's thought, likely take the time off, and perhaps at the time of the death, subsequently for a funeral, and perhaps within the year, perhaps the anniversary of the death or another notable event in the family's life calendar. Entitlement to parental bereavement leave will be a day one employment entitlement. Parental bereavement leave will be available to the mother and father of the child, including adoptive or surrogate parents. It will also be available to the partner of a parent if the partner is involved with the upbringing of the child. So this could involve up to 4 individuals, being 2 sets of parents and step-parents where all work. The balance of any leave is transferable if an employee moves to a different employer, and the right to this leave does not impact any other form of parental leave under the employment law, so it is an additional right to time off work. I believe that a great majority of employers in the island will already adopt a sensitive and considered approach when giving parents time off work in such tragic circumstances. However, the introduction of a statutory period of unpaid leave will ensure that parents in Jersey are in no doubt as to their rights to time off work. Should the Assembly adopt these changes to the employment law, I will also be implementing, via ministerial decision, a non-statutory payment scheme that will be available to any parent taking parental bereavement leave, which I would remind you is unpaid. Addressing the issue in this way means that there is no financial burden placed on employers. The taxpayer will provide financial support to parents during the times when they are taking their bereavement leave. The scheme will make payments to parents regardless of whether their employer decides to pay them while they are off work or not. Payments will match the value of the current mean average weekly earnings based on reporting published by Statistics Jersey. Presently, the mean average wage is £920 per week. That is £1,840 for each parent for a total of 2 weeks parental bereavement leave. The payment amount will adjust annually according to the latest mean average weekly wage. The scheme aims to be as simple as possible for parents, with any administration incorporated into existing processes. As far as possible, payments will be made using information already held by the government, although in some cases it may be necessary to obtain banking information from parents to make payments. I would like to extend my thanks to everyone who has been involved in the development of this legislation, in particular Deputy IA for his work in bringing the original proposition to the Assembly, the Health and Social Security Scrutiny Panel for their support of this legislation, and the Children's Commissioner for making time to review these proposals with my officers. And finally, I'd also like to thank Jo Nash of Phillips Footprints for her support and work with my officers over the past year or so in developing this legislation. Jo has also asked me to mention the apposite timing of this debate, given that next week, that is 9th to 15th October, is Baby Loss Awareness Week. Thank you, sir. I maintain the principles.
Are the principles seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the principles? Deputy IA.
Thank you, sir. I am pleased to support this proposition, which is being presented by the Minister for Social Security. It is the culmination of a great deal of work which can now finally be implemented. My proposition, P70 2021, was passed in MCON when it was debated in the Assembly on the 22nd of July of that year. That proposition requested that the Minister bring forward proposals to the States for debate prior to the end of March 2022 to grant all employees the right to 2 weeks of parental bereavement leave following the death of a child under the age of 18. The costs of the scheme to be met fully by the States. In essence, this proposition fulfills that request, even though it has been slightly later than I expected. The delay was partially due to the 2022 election. I hope that new members will note that when it comes to implementing propositions, timelines are often extended and consideration to be given to the large workload of officers. But patience is a virtue, and it is satisfying to see that now we can endorse Draft Employment Amendment number 14. It reflects the sentiments of my original proposition, and I am certainly delighted that it is finally being progressed. Linking it to the latest mean average weekly wage is also to be welcomed and is in accordance with my original proposal. The financial implications are also very similar to my earlier calculations. We must remember the terrible trauma and suffering that is the consequence of losing a child. It is often stated that time heals all wounds. But the wounds remain and the scars never fully heal. I would like to thank the Minister for bringing this proposition and ask all members to support what I believe is a vital and necessary change to employment legislation. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. And I'm sure that all States members must have sympathy for any parent who has been in this unfortunate position. And I will, of course, be supporting this. There is just one small question or a point of detail that I would ask the Minister to address, because something that wasn't particularly clear to me, and I think as this once this law comes into effect, assuming that the States Assembly supports it, it was just simply to do with the changeover. We have Article 55HA that says that the parental bereavement can be taken at any time, even if there's a change from one employee to the other. So I do request that if I haven't already missed something, that there is clarity about which employer actually pays for that leave in those circumstances, because basically it is saying that it applies in the case of any employee who employ the employee in the day the entitlement accrues. So basically, is it that that employer actually budgets for that, or is it the next employer? So just that small point of detail that I hope can be addressed. Thank you.
Deputy Dublé.
Thank you, sir. And I want to also thank the Minister for bringing this forward, and Deputy Aya. I think sometimes when it's something as emotive as this, it can be really difficult to campaign for and progress it and take it personal toll. And I really admire him for the work that he's done in bringing this to the attention of the Assembly. And there was something in the articles that I wanted to draw members' attention to, which I was particularly impressed with, and I think we should be doing more of when we're looking at new laws and perhaps reviewing existing laws. And that's Article 55HA, part, I think it's 1E. And this leave extends to, and the Minister outlined this, it could be up to 4 parents. And I think the fact that this law reflects modern families and parenting arrangements, in that blended families and extended that step-parent relationships are recognised in this law, I think that is very progressive and remarkable, and I'm delighted that that's in there, and I thank the Minister and her officers for that, and Deputy Aya again.
Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? Deputy Kovac.
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased to see this legislation coming into place, because I've been close I've seen closely the effect of such a provision not being in place for friends and neighbors when their child died and they were calling to work within 5 days. What I just want to make sure is if the minister is willing to maybe look into further how this employment legislation on bereavement can be addressed even past 18 on close family members, because what if the child is 18 and 1 day? Does it make it less painful? And just to see what provision can be made further if any consideration is given.
Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? No other member wishes to speak? I close the debate and call upon the Minister to respond.
Thank you, sir. Firstly, I would thank Deputy Aye and Deputy Doubley for their comments and for their support. In terms of the questions, to Deputy Scott, the employer does not have to pay this proposition, and this right does not affect the employment contract. And if you had an employment contract that said you will not be paid if you are absent from work beyond your holiday leave or sick leave, the employer does not have to pay. That's why the government will make the payment to parents to recompense them in that event that they have an employer who cannot, because we have to reflect that there will be some very small employers who will struggle to pay someone to be off for 2 weeks. So the government, the scheme that I discussed will make the payment. And I think I would hope that most employers will be able to work between themselves, that if an employee, when he moves, he will be able to say, he or she will be able to say, I have taken 5 days of my parental bereavement leave, and I have 5 still to take. So I would hope that employers will deal with that in a pragmatic and sensible way. But there's no issue with the employers having to budget for the payment. To Deputy Kovac, I'm not quite sure why it's been set at over 18. I imagine that also follows the UK law. And I think it really is the law is intended to apply where someone uses a very young child and not an adult child. I think a line has to be drawn somewhere for most people, even though the loss of an adult child will be equally devastating for any parent. So that's it. So, sir, I would like to propose the amendment. No, sorry. Sorry.
You would like to?
Second reading. Sorry, sir.
No, we're still on the principles. We're going to vote on the principles now.
Apologies.
Well, those in favour of adopting the principles kindly show. Those against? All the principles are adopted. Does the Health and Social Security Scrutiny Panel wish to scrutinise the matter? Deputy Howell, I think you're next down the list as who's member of the panel.
No, thank you, sir. I think we've already had a briefing. Thank you.
Very much indeed. How do you wish to deal with the matters in second reading then, Minister?
En bloc, please, sir.
Are they seconded en bloc?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the articles in second reading or any of them? Those in favour of adopting the articles kindly show. Those against? The articles are adopted in second reading. Do you propose the matter in third reading, Minister?
Yes, please, sir.
Is the matter seconded for third reading?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak in third reading? Is the appel called for, Minister?
Yes, please, sir.
Right, members to return to their seats. The vote is on the adoption of the law in third reading. I'll ask the greffier to open the voting. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The law has been adopted in third reading, 45 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstentions. The next item is the extension of cold weather bonus, P64, lodged by Deputy Porre. Deputy, you have an amendment to your own proposition, so do you wish us to take it as read by your amendment? Yes, please. Very well. Are members content to take the proposition in its amended form? Yes. I ask the greffier, therefore, to read the proposition as amended.
The states are asked to decide whether they are of opinion that eligibility for the cold weather bonus or any similar financial support scheme that is proposed or implemented by the government should be extended to include those who are in receipt of 100% long-term incapacity allowance, who are below pensionable age and who have been ordinarily resident in Jersey for a continuous period of 5 years and who otherwise qualify under paragraphs 2, 3 and 5 of Article 3 of the Schedule to the Social Security Bonus Jersey Law 2014, and to request the Minister for Social Security to take all necessary actions to allow the measures to be implemented by January 2024.
Deputy.
Thank you, sir. First of all, I would like to thank the Social Security Minister for showing willingness to work with me in bringing this proposition forward, and for the suggestions that she and the team have made to the amendment of my proposition. I would also like to thank the officers involved in supporting me with the amendment. I first felt the need to bring the extension of cold weather bonus proposition forward when answering calls from constituents asking for extra support as they were financially struggling to get through last winter. Their finances were stretched to the limits and could no longer pay essential bills such as electricity. The particular group of constituents I am referring to are those on long-term incapacity benefits. I found that often the extra available support is available by charity organizations. Although this group of people are one of the most vulnerable groups in our society, they are still proud people and not always willing to receive charity support. To date, the cold weather bonus has been available to provide assistance to lower-income pensioner households not claiming income support. The amendment to this proposition takes into consideration that it is not appropriate for the cold weather bonus to be available to all individuals in receipt of long-term incapacity allowance. The aim of the amended proposition is to extend the qualifying conditions for the cold weather bonus to include households where a member of the household is in receipt of 100% long-term incapacity allowance, and they also should be below pensionable age. This is because this group of people are one of the most affected by the winter months, where their physical and mental health conditions tend to be aggravated, leaving them less motivated and proactive, and also less likely to take on activities that require them to leave their homes. We all know that winter months and cold weather has an impact on the general health, and this is more so the case on those suffering from already ill health. This proposition is limited in scope and intended to reach those most in need of our additional support, and I hope the Assembly will help support this group of individuals. Sir, now I called for the proposition. Thank you.
Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Miller.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I'm grateful to Deputy Pori for proposing her proposition as amended. The amendment brings Deputy Pori's proposal in line with the existing eligibility criteria for the cold weather bonus. It may be helpful to members if I provide some background to the LTIA benefit to explain the need for the amendment. Long-term incapacity allowance is a contributed benefit available to working-age people who have long-term health conditions. It is assessed on a percentage basis, with the full 100% award only made to those with the highest level of incapacity. LTIA is not means tested. It's available both to low and high income individuals who have a contribution record, and indeed many recipients continue to work notwithstanding receipt of the benefit. LTIA can also, and is often, paid to a person living outside Jersey if a person moves to a country with a reciprocal social security agreement. It is possible to receive LTIA and income support at the same time for those with low incomes. Under the income support system, additional components are available to those with a significant degree of disability. People with the highest level of disability component under income support already automatically receive cold weather payments. As amended, the extension of bringing LTIA recipients now brings those people within the existing cold weather bonus structure. If the States agrees, the cold weather bonus will be extended to LTIA claimants who have lived in Jersey for at least 5 years and have a household income below the tax threshold. This maintains the targeting of tax-funded benefits towards low-income families who need the most. As I've mentioned, cold weather support is also already available to some low-income families through the income support system, and I would urge anyone struggling with bills over the winter period to check with CLS if they qualify for income support or any other of our available benefits. I'm grateful to Deputy Poirier for engaging with my officers and bringing forward this amendment. Subject to the views of the Assembly, I will bring forward legislation to make this change. The Deputy has asked for this to be implemented by January. Given that we are already in October, it may not be possible to prepare, lodge and debate legislation before the end of the year. I will ask officers to proceed with the work as quickly as possible, but it is important that I advise members at this stage that the January timing may not be achievable. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wishes to speak? Then I close the debate and call upon Deputy Poirier to respond. Very well. The appel is called for. Deputy, as a matter of form, you should have stood up when you said that. But that's quite all right. But,
Thank you.
the appel is called for. I invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on the adoption of the proposition. And I ask the greffier to open the voting. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The proposition has been adopted. 42 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstentions. The next item of public business is the Law Revision Board appointment of members, P67, lodged by the Chief Minister. The main responder is the Chair of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel. I ask the greffier to read the proposition.
The States are asked to decide whether they are of opinion, in accordance with the provisions of Article 15(2)(a) of the legislation Jersey Law 2021, to appoint Deputy P.M. Balash of St Clement and Connétable R.D. Johnson of St Mary as members of the Law Revision Board.
Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. I'm delighted to nominate Deputy Balash and the Constable of St Mary for membership of the Law Revision Board. The board plays an important role in certifying revised editions of Jersey legislation, which are prepared by or on behalf of the principal legislative drafter. The role of the state's members on the board is principally to agree at a political level changes to legislation that fall short of changing the legal effect of that legislation. Many members will be aware of the important function of the board in improving the wording of legislation and ensuring that it remains current. So I believe that the Constable of St Mary and Deputy Balash are ideal nominees for the board, and that members can have full confidence and trust in them both to fulfil this role. Membership of the board will complement their current positions as Chair and Vice Chair of the Legislation Advisory Panel. I hope, sir, that the responses received by a number of members to the communication from my private office on the 28th of July, setting out my intention to make these nominations and for which they were all supportive will be reflected across the Assembly today. So I make the nominations and move the proposition.
Is the proposition seconded? Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? Those in favour of adopting the proposition kindly show. Those against? The proposition is adopted. The next item of public business and final item is the funding of Jersey Reds, P78, lodged by Deputy Farnham. The main respondent is the Minister for Treasury and Resources. And Deputy, you've... We'll chat amongst ourselves for a moment. But
So I was trying to think of a point of order or something, but nothing's coming to mind.
Well, I'm afraid the simple fact is that if the deputy is not available to move the proposition falls away.
Thank you, sir. I do
Deputy
apologise, sir.
Farnham, your popularity was on a thread.
As it has ever been, sir, I'm afraid.
Yes. Deputy, we now come to funding of Jersey Reds. You have already indicated this morning you were prepared to take the amendment lodged by Deputy Feltham. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And are you also would you like also accept the amendment lodged by Deputy Scott?
Yes, please, sir.
Do members agree that we can take the proposition as lodged by, as amended by all of the two amendments, both of the two amendments? Very well. I don't notice any. Those in favour kindly show, I think. Sure. Those against? Very well. Then, Geoffrey, will you please read the proposition? Oh, beg your pardon, Chief Minister, did you wish to?
Perhaps it's better if I do so, but I have a conflict of interest that I wanted just to declare at the outset. I have a tenant who will be impacted by loss of earnings, and therefore I'm likely to experience a personal financial loss.
Very well.
Albeit mine.
Thank you. The Greffier, please read the proposition as amended.
The States are asked to decide whether they are of opinion to request the Minister for Treasury and Resources to take the necessary steps to make funding available to the Jersey Reds, subject to the provision of a business case by the organisation that quantifies the benefits to the club to the island and demonstrates that the organisation will remain operational for the 2023-2024 rugby season, and subject to inclusion within the proceedings of the Board of Jersey Reds of a senior representative from the Treasury and Exchequer Department and an independent representative from the business community, both to be involved in those proceedings in an advisory capacity.
Deputy.
Thank you, sir. And I do apologise to members. I thought there was time for a call of nature, sir. Then I was engaged in conversation in the downstairs lavatories by the Economic Development Minister, sir, which I think was some sort of a ploy. But here we are.
So I can't find... I was going to say, I can't find nefarious plans and standing orders anywhere, so...
Thank you, sir, and can I thank members for allowing this important debate to take place today. So the Jersey Reds are our rugby team, sir, our people, our players, the team who have made us so proud on many occasions over the years and literally making history for us by winning the Rugby Championship only a few short months ago, sir. But I can't help but feel we are close to letting them down. The government were informed in November of 2022 that, in a meeting with Deputy Stevenson that she has alluded to, that there was likely to be funding required in the future. And I believe that Deputy Stevenson made it clear, as she said earlier, that no funding was going to be available. Now, she's shaking her head, sir, at my comment, but I'm not sure why she would have said no funding was available if funding wasn't an issue discussed at that meeting, sir. And I will come back to this shortly, but I think it's just worth reminding States members that the funding that's been given to Jersey Reds has become a lot more recently, simply because following the pandemic and the massive impact of COVID on the sporting economy globally, meant that their grant was reduced by 75%, that's £500,000. So we must first of all remember that their financial challenges that have always been there, because a club in a small jurisdiction like Jersey, of course Jersey teams have the added disadvantage of having to travel by boat or by plane, and then by coach to away fixtures, provides an additional financial burden. I'm not sure what discussions were had between November and last Thursday, sir, when the shock announcement was made. But whatever happened, the Council of Ministers decided to make no further funding available to the Jersey Reds at a meeting on Tuesday, the 19th of September. And I think what is really concerning is the fact that it did take 8 days for that decision to be officially communicated to the right people in the club. I accept Deputy Morell's explanation earlier that he wanted to talk to one of the benefactors, sir, who had been in attendance at some meetings. It was also pointed out, sir, and I read this in the media today, that the Chief Minister attended a match on the 23rd of September, but didn't say anything. Maybe that was appropriate. Maybe it wasn't appropriate to talk about it at the match, sir. But it left Jersey Reds in an impossible situation with no time to respond. It became a national news story, sir, and I think it's been damaging to our island's reputation. Even today, sir, from the English rugby camp, training rugby camp in France, players are expressing publicly their concern and their empathy with Jersey Reds. I think, sir, the board, it's fair to say that given the discussions that had taken place, given the fact that £370,000 had already been forthcoming, the board, albeit wrongly or perhaps prematurely, and the management of the club were expecting a more positive outcome. They believed that having got that far and got some emergency funding, it would be sensible to provide the rest of the funding so they could see the season through, sir. And the season, for members' information, is started now, sir, and runs till the end of May, potentially, with cup fixtures. Would go ahead, so they believed that, and been criticised for not perhaps sharing the information with their staff and members. But I think, whilst we could be critical of that, there is a fine line when you're trying to run and maintain the motivation of professional athletes. And I think they just made the wrong call. They were expecting, I think, rightly or wrongly, more support. So they were completely shocked when they got the chop, as it were, from the Council of Ministers and the day before the deadline. And that is what caused the problems. The economic value of the Jersey Reds playing in the Championship is considerable. But it has been measured, sir, in 2016, 8 years ago, and I believe that 2.1 million of benefit was the figure presented to the Council of Ministers when they considered the matter some 7 years later, which I think was probably not really appropriate in the context of what's happened since then. In overall terms, the economic value of the Jersey Reds to our local economy is estimated now, sir, at around £5 million a year. It's impossible to give a really, really accurate estimate, sir. And I do think that whatever happens in the future, we do need to invest some money. The Economy Department needs to do some really in-depth study into sports tourism, sports impact on the economy. That was one of the reasons why sport was put in the Economy Department in 2014, I think. I'm looking at the Chief Minister. He remembers that. And I don't think we've ever made as much of it as we can. But the Jersey Reds as a professional sports team, I think, has demonstrated just what economic benefit it can bring. In an appendix attached to my proposition is a paper entitled Jersey Reds Benefits to the Island, which I will just go through some of, sir, if I may. So, the paper, sir, illustrates the economic benefit of Jersey Reds professional rugby activity in the 2022-23 season. That was roughly September 22 to May 2023, which of course resulted in the winning of the championship. This is one element of the contribution to the island. The others, which are illustrated in the appendixes, are aggregated to show the overall hard economic benefit. And although this was produced internally by the rugby club, sir, it is based on facts and figures as presented in the accompanying spreadsheet, taken from Gates, and numbers, accurate numbers, tangible numbers, that they've compiled through their own Gates and through speaking to the other clubs. So also included are the revenues associated with the pre-season matches against London Irish, Bath and Leicester, and the England training camp in October 2022, using the similar assumptions that they used for the rest of the season. In total, the sums included in the spreadsheet at rows headed A, B, C, and D are the sums that playing and associated revenues produce, being approximately £2.62 million each year. In addition, at row E, the revenues associated with amateur rugby in all its forms that are administered by the Jersey Rugby Football Club are arrived at using estimates from the Jersey Rugby Football Club themselves, and a total of further £832,000 from amateur rugby, which is very good, sir, but that is also partly enabled by the fact that the facilities are in place because of the professional activities provided by Jersey Reds. And whilst these revenues are not directly produced by Reds, the services that Reds provide to the amateur club provide them with a first-class infrastructure and ensure the continuation of amateur rugby in all its forms and all its levels that could not be as easily sustained by themselves, sir. Essentially, the Reds provide services valued at approximately £250,000, sir, to the JRFC, sir, and of course that includes all of the maintenance of facilities, all of the utilities, insurance, running the club facilities and the grounds, sir. Now, without professional rugby, the amateur club wouldn't need all of that infrastructure. But I've actually spoken today to the chairman of the Jersey Rugby Club, the amateur side, sir, who still thinks that they would survive, sir. They would survive without the professional side, but it's estimated roughly, sir, that the additional cost, the additional money needed to be fined by the amateurs would be about £100,000 a year, sir. Other sources of economic benefit to Jersey include taxes to the government of Jersey, ITIS, sir, and GST that have been estimated at £520,000. Excise duty on bar sales, sir, at £200,000. Salary of staff net of tax, £1.3 million, sir, spent on island. Other payments to on-island suppliers, rates, food, alcohol, utilities, etc., £400,000, sir. That totals £2.4 million, sir. So if you add that to the £2.6 million, that comes to £5 million, sir. Approximately, that's without applying an economic multiplier, sir. Multiplier is commonly used assumption to give the effect that once a person spends £1, sir, there is a trickle-down effect from the recipient's subsequent expenditure. It's a standard economic procedure, sir, and applying a low multiplier or an average multiplier of 1.3 would increase that 5 million to 6.5 million. Now, these aren't absolutely scientifically accurate figures, but I think they're a very good guide of the economic benefit we get. And whether it's 2.1 million or 6.5 million, we can be sure that somewhere in between there's a very good indicator of the pounds and pence that are spent on this island as a result of the professional rugby provided by Jersey Reds. Before I come on to the additional benefits, I just wanted to remind members of the, the importance of promoting the economy or generating more economic activity during the shoulder and winter months, which is, of course, where all of the action happens with professional rugby. For example, sir, one figure in the spreadsheet, it's almost 18,000 flights, seats on airlines and ferries are generated over those winter months by very largely the professional rugby, and also some amateur rugby. That's 18,000 seats. Now, that is, I think, you could argue that in the scheme of all the seats, it's quite a small figure, but it's vitally important through the winter. Ask any taxi driver, match days, they're back and forwards all the time with passengers. That's just one example of how the trickle-down run through to the smaller businesses in the economy. Deputy Stevenson, I think, on an interview on BBC Radio Jersey, sir, alluded to the fact that the government shouldn't really be investing or participating in this sort of activity, but we do it in many other areas. So we provide millions and millions of pounds worth of funding to our valued arm's length organisations who promote other areas of economic activity, such as Digital Jersey, Visit Jersey, and of course Jersey Sport. And I'm going to look to the Assistant Minister at that one, who I think the annual budget is in the region of £2 million to support Jersey Sport in the activities they carry out. I'm getting a blank look, sir, but I'm going to... No, I'm not going to get an indication, but I think it's something like that, and I understand their activity is being reviewed. But also, sir, we, through Ports of Jersey, incentivise airlines to fly passengers to and from the island and maintain the rotations and maintain the very good services we get through the winter month. We incentivise them financially to do that, which is in contradiction to the government policy according to Deputy Stevenson. And we do that because if we didn't do that, we would have less transport links. We wouldn't enjoy the great transport links that we do now. So it seems odd that with one hand we're giving money quite rightly to incentivise air travel, and on the other hand we're pulling money from an organisation that provides them with 18,000 seats on the aircraft during the winter months when they need it most. And I think that's an important point to make. Other soft benefits include the fact that Jersey Reds are now an iconic Jersey brand. They're an iconic national brand, having won the championships, but having been a professional side for some time. The public relations and reputational benefit for Jersey derived from their activity and their recent successes is a material consideration, but it's difficult to value in monetary terms, sir. But we do not have analysis, or the rugby club, and I don't think the economy department or Visit Jersey does have an analysis of this. But for reference to PR value to Jersey in equivalent media spend terms, for the British and Irish Lions training camp in 2021, if members remember that, which if I remember rightly, the states provided a grant of £175,000 to bring the Lions here, generated the value, the advertising equivalent media value of that, which was estimated by Visit Jersey, was £6 million. That's over and above the other economic benefit I mentioned, of course. And that excludes, sir, all of the exposure, the televised matches and the exposure we get when Jersey Reds play at home and away. It's not suggested that the Reds' normal activity generates this amount, but nevertheless, the benefits, this benefits us, sir, in the multiple millions of pounds per annum. And we have not estimated the social benefit or the halo effect, as it's often referred to, of the mini and junior participation in rugby due to Reds being involved in those activity. And they do provide, the professional players provide great role models, sir, to our aspiring young athletes who want perhaps a career, who want to play professional rugby, and it gives them the opportunity. And again, Deputy, I think Stevenson was critical of the fact that we didn't have any Jersey players in the team. Well, we have had. And quite often when members of Jersey Reds who aren't from Jersey retire, they stay on and end up playing for the amateur side. I mean, but, you know, this is professional sport, and while we are the Jersey Reds, it's not really surprising that we don't have too many people from Jersey. I'm not sure if many people from Manchester, sir, play for Manchester United. I'm not sure if many people from Ealing play in Championship side Ealing, sir. I happen to know for sure, for 100%, sir, that the side that play in our league, Cornish Pirates, sir, don't have any Cornish Pirates playing for them. So please don't be surprised at that statistic. As I said, so all of this spend and benefit goes largely into the previously much weaker shoulder months. It's a perfect blend to extend the season and support the economy through the winter when we need it most. As I said, the figures do not include the PR and the positive experiences generated by the Jersey Reds activity. There have also been, sir, I might as well mention it now, 2 England rugby training camps. Jersey Reds events have brought over 20 rugby and non-rugby sporting celebrities to the island over the past 2 years alone, sir. 4 Premiership teams have also chosen the island for their pre-season training camps, sir. All of this high-profile activity promotes Jersey, and it's a wonderful reminder to the world, sir, that Jersey has so much to offer beyond our known strengths, sir, beyond our well-known sort of brand, sir, as an offshore financial services centre, or some wrongly label us as a tax haven. So I think it's important we promote, people see Jersey for the other great activities and great benefits it brings. And I think professional sport and other sporting activities is a great way to promote us as a jurisdiction that offers other things. So how did we come to this point? So why do I have to crave members' indulgence to stand before you all today? And going back to a point I made earlier, sir, in 2021, the Rugby Football Union slashed the grant paid to all championship rugby teams by more than 70%, sir. That is a drop of £500,000 a year. It made funding professional rugby teams very challenging. But Jersey has always supported our professional rugby team because of the value it brings to our island and the economic benefits, as I've previously mentioned, sir. And I think the rugby union, I don't think they had much choice, as many other sporting organisations did during that challenging times when we weren't allowed to gather in crowds and participate as spectators in sporting events, sir. But that has had a massive impact on Jersey Reds' finances. Now, we have always funded them, and Constable of St Lawrence asked a very important question, and I'm not sure, because I haven't got Jack email, if we've managed to get those figures in yet, but that's certainly worth looking at. The grant funding, the money we have given Jersey Reds in previous years, I think has proven to be provide an excellent return on our investment over the years. On an average, around £150,000 per annum has been invested or spent, whatever way you want to, in Jersey Reds over the last 7 years by government. I think, judging by the appendix in Deputy Morrell's statement, probably almost half of that has come since the rugby union cut their grant. So we can see, whilst there's always been financial support required, cutting of the grant in 2021, sir, has had a massive impact and made it very, very difficult for Jersey Reds to remain as a financially viable concern, sir, without support from the states, hopefully in the short term, but I'll come on to that, sir. I've got a note here. So say over that 7-year period, whether we take an average between the 2016 report that said there's approximately 2.1 million of economic return to Jersey Red's project on last season's figures of 5 million. If we say an average figure of about 3.5 million spent in the economy in the last 7 years, 25 million, a million investment for a 25 million pound return in the economy, that's 25, every pound we give Jersey Reds, we get 25 pounds spent back without the other soft benefits. I don't think that is a bad investment. And although I know, sir, we are a prudent, believe it or not, well, most of the time, a prudent assembly. We have been for generations. That's why the island is in a healthy financial position. None of us like to throw good money, what we see as being good money, after bad. And of course, I know there is concern about speculation of any poor financial decision making by Jersey Reds, but I'm going to address that because I haven't seen any evidence of it. I think any business who was reliant on a grant and gets that reduced by £500,000, which is probably, almost a quarter of its income, will struggle, sir. On top of the money we've put in, private benefactors, local residents have donated many millions as well over the same period of time. It's been a great partnership between private and public sectors with a common goal: to keep professional rugby here. Some questions I've been asked by other members and members of the public is why have the directors not stepped in at this stage to save the jobs? And that's a question I put to them at the weekend. I spoke to some of them, and it's quite difficult because we've had government ministers accusing the board of being slightly, I don't know if they used the word arrogant, but they indicated the board were very difficult to deal with. And coincidentally, the board have indicated that ministers have been quite difficult to deal with. So we've got a little bit of a standoff, which isn't helpful, sir. But these directors, so none of the directors are paid. They don't even get expenses. All they do is put money in. One individual benefactor has put over £2 million worth of their own personal money in. And whilst they're aware of the fact that they do come back for support time and time again, they felt strongly that before they were going to continue to put more of their own money in. They wanted some more help from the government, because the only financial benefactor of professional rugby, the only body, if we call it that gains financially, is the economy of Jersey. So it figures that Jersey should do something, to invest in that, as long as there's a return. There has to be a return. And whilst we've put £1 million in over the last 7 years, we've got probably a conservative estimate of £25 million back. So the structure of the organisation with the rugby club, which largely has all of the movable assets now secured in the rugby club, there's still some work to be done on that. It is protected. Then we have Jersey Reds 2022 Limited, which is owned by the benefactors, and that's used there to loan and give money to Jersey Reds Trading Company. That's the company that does all the trading. That's where all the wages are paid from, the gate receipts, the bar receipts go, sir. And as I said, the directors of Jersey Reds Limited, they're not remunerated, they don't take money out, they only put money in and write loans off, sir, but they need the companies to manage that process. It's a philanthropic project. No fees, no expenses. That's why it's done. So whether you agree or not, I think the benefactors, the sponsors of Jersey Reds, the private sponsors, have said, right, okay, we've done enough. We want a bit more from the government. And perhaps one of the mistakes we've made, and I'll hold my hand up for this as well, when I was Economic Development Minister, is we used to do it a bit on an ad hoc basis. We used to wait until we were asked, where actually we perhaps should have provided an annual grant that was allocated in our government plan or our budget, like we do with other valuable events such as Air Display, Battle of Flowers, and so forth. And I think that's what we have to think about. If we want professional sport, if we want to develop our sports economy, that's what we need to do. We need to plan for it, and we need to accrue for it properly, sir. Sir, it's been unhelpful that there is a bit of a standoff between government and the board, but it is, I think we can rectify this. And I think if the states support the proposition today, so I think that will send a strong signal of confidence to potential investors, benefactors, and sponsors, sir, that we're going to help. Because when the states does engage as a financial partner, it brings confidence to all other stakeholders. And it's easier then to raise money. It will definitely, further support from us, sir, will definitely unlock further private sector funding, sir. I want to now refer to the slide set that I put in labelled Business Model Review, sir, which was produced, sir, entirely by Santander International, sir. Santander International, I'm sure Treasury Minister will agree, one of our most well-respected financial institutions, and hugely important to Jersey in very many ways, produced this report, which has been the subject of scathing criticism from other members and ministers, sir. But it has been produced by Santander. And that sets out clearly a way forward, sir. And I suspect, and that's one of the reasons I was pleased to accept Deputy Felton's helpful amendment, because she calls quite rightly for a safety net of some business planning. And we have the foundation of that here. So there is time to update this, and this will need updating. And if members do have questions, they can take back to Santander, rather than sneering at it from across their seats in this assembly. Bring it up with Santander and say, this is where we think you might have gone wrong there. It can be easily amended, but any mistakes in here, or perceived mistakes, or figures that are slightly wrong, are not going to make a massive impact on the overall outcome of what this says and the direction of travel which it recommends. I just wanted to make that point, because I'm sure we're going to see the government strategy today is one that will want to discredit the management, the board of the Reds, the financial planning. But I want to say these are figures that have been put together carefully and thoughtfully. That is a part of a review of a three-year plan produced, I say, in June and July of this year. And I presume it was on the back of that plan that the Council of Ministers changed their mind. After having put £370,000 in, they looked at that, didn't like it, and decided. I'm speculating, but I don't know why they would put 370,000 in and then stop. Because it's going to cost a lot more to stop than it is to put a bit more in to keep them going. I don't really understand that. If we keep them going, we keep £3, £4 or £5 million, probably more, of economic benefit for the next, between now and the end of May. So whatever it's cost us, the multiplier return is good. There have been claims of financial mismanagement by the board, or financial naivety, or they're spending too much money, but I haven't seen any evidence of that. They've been accused of, quietly, sir, I don't know if this has been out, but I've heard all the whispers and people saying it. Did you know this? Did you know that? And the other, like happens in Jersey. Everyone knows what they think they know, but most of it is wrong. Accused, sir, of spending too much money on players' wages. You know what the average pay is for a professional rugby player in the Jersey Reds? About £26,000 a year. £26,000 a year, that's half of what we all earn. So no professional rugby for us. I'm certainly not going to switch my generous salary for that. So £26,000 a year is what they get paid. And the only aspiration for buying better players and maybe spending, even at that average pay, a bit more money than they should have done, was their aspiration to win the league. Now, some have suggested that was going above their station and they should have been happy with just keeping themselves down in the bottom half of the table. But, you know, it's difficult to do that when you have highly motivated professional athletes who are highly regarded by the community they work in, sir. And to say to them, well, look, we don't want you to win, just throw the odd game, we don't want to go up there, because it's going to be more expensive for us to do well. I should also add that Santander, sir, the group sponsors, who are 100% supportive, and I'm not sure if members know this of the club, they want the club to continue, they've guaranteed they continue their sponsorship, but in addition to that, and it's in here, sir, they have offered to spend up to £1.5 million in paying for and installing an artificial pitch at the rugby club for Jersey Reds. So that, sir, is we also, if we don't support this a bit longer, we throw away a 1.5 million potentially investment in a facility that the whole community can use, sir. The whole community, the juniors and the minis, sir, the education department. It means that numerous games can be played on the same day, increasing gate potential, so it can be hired out and generate significant revenue, sir. That's part of what we're chucking out here. As I mentioned earlier, sir, contained in the Santander review is reference to a new deal being worked out to restructure the top tier of English rugby. The new deal, or better put, new model, including greatly enhanced sustainable funding, is due to be announced in December. We should at least keep going then until that's announced. Because the Rugby Football Union has talked to the management of the Jersey Reds, as reported in the media, sir, and they have realised that what they have in place now is not working. If they don't change the model and they don't increase the funding to the championship clubs, and I think the plan is for them to have the future leagues, Premier 1, Premier 2, there will be no championship club, there will be no Premier 2 if they don't revisit their business model and increase funding to the clubs. And I'm not saying, sir, that it's going to go back to where it was, but it certainly should increase on what it is now. Because the Rugby Football Union have realised they won't be able to maintain this tier if they don't support the clubs to that level. It has to work, sir. There'll be no professional rugby. It would be a premier and a very elite premiership, and that is it. So we surely owe it to the Jersey Reds, to the staff, to all the people there, sir, to the players, to give themselves a breathing space so that situation, largely outside of their control, can hopefully be resolved by a new deal from the Rugby Football Club, sir, which we've told will be details which come in December. Surely we've got to keep it going till then. It would be foolhardy not to, sir. I spoke briefly about the impact on the Jersey Rugby Football Club, the amateur side, which is so important. But just to say, so that will continue. I'm so pleased to say. But I think by losing professional rugby, sir, that will put us back 2 decades in rugby development. And 2 decades ago, it was 2006 when I think Jersey Reds took on their first 2 professional players, and we've seen how it's evolved since then. And it's for all rugby is not a game. It's not an elitist game for wealthy people, as has been mentioned, sir. And you only have to look around, go to Wales and Scotland and Ireland and the towns and cities all around the civilised world, and you realise just what an inaccurate and naive comment that has been, sir. It might be perceived by that, as some over here, because it encompasses all sectors of our community. The government, having looked at the comments, will say, we're asking for a blank cheque. And again, as I've said before, we're always on a bit of a hiding to nothing here, because if I had to put a figure in, that figure would have been criticised. it would have been said, well, what happens if that's not enough? Or what happens if that, or it's too much, we can't possibly support that. So I made the decision after speaking to, I phoned a few members over the weekend and had a chat and took advice. But I thought the government wouldn't try and pull that one. They'd try and enter this if the states asked them to revisit it in the spirit for which it's intended, which is to continue, it's a continuation of professional rugby. And given Deputy Feltham's amendment and Deputy Scott's amendment, which puts another layer of potential protection in, I think it's not beyond the bounds of reality or being unrealistic to expect the government to say, well, look, we've got the government, the plan here said they needed 590,000. The announcement of the potential close and liquidation will have caused some cash flow issues that will cause concerns for creditors. That is going to have to change. I think that's going to that will go up. But you know, it gives the leeway for the government, with the safeguards put in place by the amendments, to, you know, to negotiate something that's realistic without being constrained by a figure. So it's a no-win situation. I would have put a figure, if I said, well, let's cap it at £500,000, it would have been too much, or it might not have been enough. And, you know, the argument would have been, well, supposing they need 510,000, we can't do it. You know, so that's what we're going to get from the government, but please try and see through that. And it is entirely realistic for the government to negotiate with the Jersey Reds and their sponsors and the directors a way forward that everybody wants to see. So you know, Jersey Reds is invaluable. Instead of trying to say, you know, it's a blank check, let's support the staff and the players, let's throw them a lifeline here. It's the least we can do, as they have done so much for us, sir. A reasonable and pragmatic lifeline proposed in the Santander review, which will need, I think, refining given the events of recent days, have before them. Please support it and vote to support your team, sir, to support our team, to support our community, sir. And I think, not most of all, but from an economic, you know, take a hard-nosed business approach to this. This is a sensible financial investment, because whatever happens to the Jersey Reds, whether they get through the season, whether they will without our support, whether they last another 3 seasons or 10 seasons, sir, every pound we put in right now, we get a multiple back, sir, and a myriad of other social and community benefits as well. And I respect members, and I will respect members' concerns about their you know, this being a bit of a money pit. It's not a black hole, sir. It's not. You can see you can see from their financial forecasting. It's a business that, with an income of about £3 million, so that includes over £700,000 for sponsors, a myriad of local sponsors, sir, and about £3 million worth of outgoing with some government support. So it's not going to be a situation where the government suddenly has to find £5 or £10 million. This is, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of pounds. I know it's a huge sum of money, but in the context of things, in the context of what we're talking about, I think it's a reasonable amount, and that will bring us much more than just a financial return. So when we look at it, at the proposed expenditure in the government plan, sir, it puts some context around it. I could probably, if we had the time, we could probably go through that government plan and slice out, if you put the money that the rugby club need to keep them going without even noticing it. And I'm not going to go on, sir, I promise, about hospital expenditure. We'll save that for another day. So, sir, I thank members for their forbearance. I thank members for allowing this important debate. Professional rugby is important to our community, to our island. We punch way above our weight, as we do with other amateur sports, sir. And just for the record, I support more funding for amateur sports, sir, based on what they bring for the island, and also based on an economic return. If amateur sports, which many are, bring a good economic return, we should look at that when we consider funding them, to try and grow that, because collectively we'll all benefit from that, sir. So I thank members. I will listen with respect to all of their arguments, sir. Thank them for debating. It's important, it's worthy, this subject's worthy of a state's debate, sir. I thank members and present the proposition. Thank you.
Proposition seconded. I open the debate. Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased to support and second this proposition if it does need an additional seconder, but especially with the caveat that it has been amended. And I think that the amendment put forward by my colleague Deputy Feltham, I think, provides the necessary safeguards that should be able to strike a balance between that open-ended check, the open checkbook that has been alluded to, which may be more figurative, and some members will use that as an argument against, to actually saying, let's look at the detail, let's get more detail, but let's try and keep this wonderful project that I think Jersey Reds has been afloat, and actually get us to a position where we can try and get some unity around them to buy into this success for more time, for further seasons to come. I was reminded of the quote which somebody told me early on in my political life. I think it's John or Bobby Kennedy said it, and it's that success has 1,000 fathers, but failure is an orphan. And it's interesting that when Jersey Reds were on the up and when they were winning the league, all sorts of people, even those who were not natural rugby fans, got caught up in the enthusiasm of that and say, isn't it great that for once we've got another but a unique Jersey success story here, which is good for the island. And what I'd like to do is that we've heard a lot about the financial imperatives here. We've heard a lot from Deputy Farnham, I think quite rightly, about the tangible financial benefits that this brings to the island. We're going to hear some arguments in a moment about whether the investment from the public sector is justified in terms of what the rugby club, Jersey Reds, brings into the island. And of course, that's absolutely where the crux of this debate will be determined. I think there have been some ideological arguments, I think, and I'm hearing those from certain ministers in the Council of Ministers who I think are very much making an ideological case against Jersey Reds, saying, you're a private company, why should we give you money when we wouldn't give other private companies that money? But already, in question time this morning after the statement from the Economic Development Minister, we've heard the argument we're not just talking about an ordinary company here. We're talking about a sporting entity, which if in fact it was an arts entity, which I will talk about in a moment, because I think there's a great synergy between arts, culture and sport. It used to be education, sport and culture. It's now economic development, sport and culture. Is that there's an inherent differentiation between the way we should be applying expectations to private businesses which do their own thing, which are funded privately, and sporting clubs and cultural organisations, which we know are not there primarily to make a profit. They're there because they have an underlying social value and a social richness which they bring to the island. And I think we sometimes forget that. And I think it's sometimes the case that the sporting community in Jersey do a lot quietly behind the background. They do it at grassroots level, they do it predominantly at amateur level, and here we're seeing a very good example of what some call elite sport. Now, elite sport can be used pejoratively or it can be used to encourage, but what we're talking about is professional high-level sport here, which I think is great for the island because it doesn't just apply to sports people who can aspire. You know, you can go and watch high-level sport at it's St. Peter, but you also know that it's an opportunity for people to experience that, especially people in the lower social quartiles, economic quartiles, who may not be able to travel outside of the island to experience what is almost top-level rugby in the island. But it's quite clear that there's a lot of passion around what Jersey Reds have achieved, because I've certainly been contacted by members of the public, and I've been doing this job in St. Brelard for 15 years, and there are people I've never heard of before who I know who have contacted me on this single issue and asked us to support Jersey Reds. I don't make that as an argument in favour or against, but it clearly is good to see people so passionate about a local success story. So I think there is a social value here that hasn't been taken into account. And it's a shame that we haven't got the Minister for International Development here, because I wanted to ask really about and to discuss the issue of national identity. Jersey isn't a nation in the true sense of the word, but we often hear ministers in the past, and I know that the current External Relations Minister talks about Jersey as a small nation state. I think we could quibble over that exact definition, but it's clear that Jersey has a very unique identity as a crown dependency, and it's very unique and has taken that pride in its unique status over centuries. And here we've seen something which is almost akin to a national team. So it's not quite Jersey's national rugby team, but it kind of is, isn't it? Because it doesn't compete at international level. Jersey can't compete at international level. But it's the next best thing that we've got to a national rugby team. It competes on the highest stage that it can, and it does that nationally, and it does that week in, week out, with half of the games played in Jersey, half of the games played away. And so it's an opportunity for local people to get behind the local team. And when you ask the question, why should we be funding a private business? You're probably likely to solicit a certain answer. But if you say, should government be funding their national football team, their national rugby team, their national cricket team, the answer is, of course they should. Of course the government should be involved in supporting their national rugby team, because other countries do it. When I went to Georgia, it was a good case in point that of course they have a rugby team in Georgia. I suspect it doesn't wash its own face. None of the national teams do. They get funding, and it's part of the cost that you pay as a nation. On top of that, it leads me to the next point, that there's an added benefit, that people know about Jersey. Some people know about Jersey only because of the rugby. Yeah, they might have heard things about Jersey somewhere else. They may have never been to Jersey, and I know that people have been to Jersey for the first time only because they're an away fan and they travel to the rugby club, and they say, we never knew about Jersey before. It's such a beautiful place to come to, and you know what, we're going to come back. We're going to come back not to watch a match, we're going to bring our family, we're going to bring our friends over here as well. So I think there is that case, and I was reminded about the money that we do put into the arts sector. It's partly because we have a formula and it's sustainable. Somebody had this great idea somewhere along the line, and it wasn't me, incidentally. That came from a report which was commissioned by the former Assistant Minister for Arts and Culture, Deputy Norton. But the report was never published. It had all these great ideas in it, and one of them was to give 1% of the budget to arts, heritage and culture. And what it means is that we get great things that happen in Jersey now. Did anyone go and see the Earth Globe that was put at the reservoir? How much money did that cost? How much public money went into that so that people could go for free to look at a globe and they didn't pay a penny to get in? They might have made a donation, but that was funded somehow and somebody was brought over. It's not a Jersey piece of art. It's a piece of art which touched, I think, tens of thousands of people in the island. And now we've got this thing that we've created. And I think we're so quick, some of us, to want to drop this beautiful success story that Jersey Reds has become because they've all of a sudden got some financial issues. And of course we know that some of the financial issues are to do with the way that the rugby, the RFU, funds its second tier. But as I suggested during question times, where is the non-financial government support been? I think if I'd have been in government at the time, and I'm not a big rugby fan, I admit that, I would have been saying, which one of the new ministers is going to be contacting the RFU to say diplomatically and politely, you know, we've got this situation in Jersey where we've won the league, not just them, but we, because they are a collective success story for the island. Why aren't you allowing us to compete in the top division? Because that would surely bring in more kudos, certainly, but I think more availability for funds. One thing I do have to say on the arts strategy and sector is that we had another great event this weekend. It was the Corn Riots, and we had local bands playing, and that receives a fraction of the funding that some other things get. And I was reminded of a term that's common in Gerrier. It's a term which is unique to Gerrier, which is engerbere. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, and it means togetherness. And again, this is one area where we see Jersey Reds able, because it's something that sport can uniquely do, in an island where we have so many divisions economically, socially and politically, and a lot of those divisions, certainly politically, are part of a healthy democracy. There are certain rare things which bring people together, and I think sport, the success of Jersey Reds, is one of those rare things that brings all islanders together, no matter where you come from. And as Deputy Farnham has explained, of course Jersey Reds bring in people from abroad, because that's what successful sporting clubs do. But it doesn't mean that the local players don't aspire to also be part of that success story. So what I would say is that today we've got an opportunity here to set an in principle vote of confidence towards Jersey Reds. And what I noticed in the culture and arts sector is that as soon as government steps up to the plate and says we're going to provide long-term sustainable funding for arts, culture and heritage, it sends a vote of confidence to the wider industry, to the private sector, who then say, well, okay, if government's taking the sports sector seriously in the island, if the government is willing to put its hand in its pocket and invest, because I think that's what it is, it's not lost money, and invest in their sports club and in that success, then we will be willing to do that as well. And I heard exactly the same thing for investors when it comes to the arts sector. So I just put those questions on the record. What about our national pride? What about that relationship between public and private sector in sponsoring this, I think, what has been and what should continue to be a success story? And the last point I will make, sir, is that where is the vision for rugby in the islands? When I came to culture and arts with that proposition, I had a vision for the kind of events that I wanted to see happening, you know. And I won't mention the fact that there's an example of the Opera House that we could give, okay? How much money do we pour into the Opera House? And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It is ultimately correct that we put money into the Opera House, but it's been shut for 2 years, okay? The Opera House has been shut for 2 or 3 years. It won't reopen till the end of next year. And we're already putting £11.5 million into it. The Economic Development Minister said it may be more than that because there might be unexpected problems. So we don't even know whether the Opera House, which probably won't get 1,800 people every other week coming to see a piece of theatre or play in the Opera House, but we nonetheless fund that because we think it's an important part of Jersey's cultural psyche. So when it comes to sport, I would make the same argument. Where is the vision that we have for rugby? And I would like to see a vision where government gets behind the rugby team, where sponsorship comes, and it could well be, it's conditional, it could well be that if we're going to give you this money and you will be sponsored by Visit Jersey, for example. It doesn't have to be that. And when Visit Jersey is going out there, who we also give money to, we're going to be loud and proud about telling you to come and visit our island, which has its unique culture, it has its unique language, and which has a very good rugby team, which we want to be playing in the very top division because they qualified for it, sir. That's what I want this government to be saying. Those are the kind of words which I think would engender the spirit of engerbede, which I talked about earlier, the spirit of togetherness that we should be expecting from this government. Not, as I suspect, and unfortunately, is very much coming out, is let's kick this team when they're down, because this is a time when Jersey Reds needs a friend, and I think that friend should include the government of Jersey.
Thank you. Deputy Ayer.
Thank you, sir. One of the fundamental problems faced by the Jersey Reds, as I see it, is their inability to apply to join the Premiership. The home of the Jersey Reds is their stadium in St Peter, which accommodates a maximum of 4,000 spectators. To join the Premiership, a club requires grounds with a spectator capacity of at least 5,000, with the possibility of extending that to at least 10,000. What this means is that no matter how many times the Jersey Reds win the championship, they will not be accepted into the Premiership division. It is clear that if they are to survive financially, the Jersey Reds would need a greater source of income. But the club will never progress beyond the Championship division unless an entirely new stadium is constructed and financed. We must examine the case for even more exorbitant funding to cover the cost of a stadium with Premiership-grade occupancy. A few days before their final match at home against the Exeter Chiefs, a team which had previously won the Premiership twice in recent years, I asked a member of the board how many spectators he expected to see at the game. He replied that he was hoping for 3,000 people to attend. His estimate sounded reasonable, but in reality, less than 2,000 people paid to watch the match. A professional rugby team simply cannot survive with such pitifully low attendances. The Rugby Football Union's statement concerning the Jersey Reds stated, Championship clubs had clear confirmation from the RFU on funding for the 2023-24 season, and we have been working with the Championship and Premiership Rugby on the new professional game partnership and shape of Premiership 2, with funding levels to be confirmed at the end of this calendar year. In other words, there is no assurance given by the RFU of funding being increased or maintained from the 1st of January 2024. In consequence, if Deputy Farnham's proposition is passed today, we cannot know how much money would be required and would in effect have to issue a blank cheque, something I am sure that members will shy away from. There seems to have been clear mismanagement of the Jersey Reds, such as historic failures of governance, which remain unaddressed to this day. If this proposition were to be successful, the whole structure of the club would need to be fundamentally altered. This would take an inordinate amount of time. It would be foolhardy to pledge additional support from the taxpayer whilst these failures remain unresolved. The Times rugby correspondent summed it up succinctly. Jersey clearly overstretched themselves. As a business model, professional rugby in England is broken, with income too low and salaries too high. I will certainly be opposing this proposition and hope that all members will do the same. Thank you, sir.
Colin Harbison, John.
Thank you, sir. Sir, like all members, I'm sure our thoughts have been with the players, staff and dedicated supporters of Jersey Reds over this last week. I'd like to start by looking back, sir. I moved to Rue d'Alonde in St. Peter's as a youngster in 1972. At the end of the road was the rugby club. And as youngsters, we'd walk up to watch games most weeks, often watching my teachers play in those early years, something I repeated when I used to take my own son to watch his teachers play as the club climbed up through the leagues. So on and off, sir, I've watched rugby at St. Peter's for some 50 years. Like a number of my colleagues on these benches, when I was old enough, I'd do my very best to support the club by going to their very popular Sunday nights, albeit we weren't supposed to dance. As a general sports fan, I've watched with interest the involvement of the club and indeed the sport. In the early days of me watching, the prop forwards would literally walk from one punch-up to the next. These passages of play were called rucks. Today, the professionals sprint around the pitch, but so do the amateurs, who I'd remind members are playing in the 6th level. The proposer on the radio this morning and again this afternoon suggested it would take 2 decades to return to the Championship. Well, that may be so, but equally, it may be possible for them to be there in just 4 seasons, if that is what they want to do. If I can turn to the business model review referred to by the proposer, what surprises me is not necessarily the information contained in the document, but more so what isn't in the document and the lack of source information. There is a reference to notes, but the notes are not included. There is a new income stream identified, that of a 3G pitch. Yet we read again today that the pitch actually belongs to the Jersey Rugby Football Club and not Jersey Reds. It also talks about the potential for the Moretti to be played at St. Peter, albeit as of last night, the Jersey FA hadn't been contacted about the latest plans. As a volunteer, before I was elected, I was actually present at a meeting at the Rugby Club, Jersey Football Association and Jersey Bulls just a couple of years ago, when both football organisations made it very clear that they saw the future of football, including Moretti finals, remaining in their long-term home in St Helier, and I don't believe either organisation has changed its view. Sir, unfortunately, there's no balance sheet included. How much of this year's sponsorship has been spent? How much of this year's ticket sales has been spent? We've got absolutely no idea what assets the company has or doesn't have. We have no idea what debts and commitments the organisation has or doesn't have. We read that the Jersey Reds are the 5th highest players' wage bill in the league. Are we comparing apples with apples? What is the cost of coaching and administration for the other 5 clubs in that table? What is the total wage bill for all 12? We do not see what the clubs from 6 to 12 are paying. I dare say it's a lot less, and I'll come on to that. The table on page 10 suggests that the cost of coach's salary was included in Jersey Reds players' cost for 2017, 18, 19 and 20. It was shown as a new cost in 21, and the players' salaries dropped by a similar amount that year. That is an assumption that I've made, sir, because it is not clear in the paper that has been there. So how much do the other 7 clubs invest in the player's salary in the Championship that we haven't seen? Sir, not all clubs are full-time professional, yet there's nothing in the document to suggest the wages could be cut. A recent article on BBC Sport suggested that Cornish Pirates may go part-time next season, despite a recent very successful crowdfunding effort. The chief executive of Cornish Pirates is quoted as saying, "There are other models. The Championship is split and made up of clubs that operate very differently. You get guys who have been teaching all week and then jump on a bus and come down and play. That's not to say that we won't be doing the same here in Cornwall. It could be we operate a different model to the one we currently do." In Hartpury, sir, they have a different model. They have a partnership with Gloucester, yet there are no suggestions of dual registrations, something that's worked in the past for Jersey Reds. So why not aim to partner with a Premier club? If anybody cares to look at the London Scottish website, they appealed for supporters to help find jobs, saying, "In light of the Rugby Football Union cuts, the ongoing financial effects of the pandemic, and the necessary transition to part-time rugby, players' primary source of income has fundamentally been affected. But for having a greater range of jobs to offer, we could make a couple of further headline signings." Sir, the potential for bright professional people to work in various industries on this island and also to continue to play rugby at a very high level has always been available. I do have sympathy because of the RFU cut funding and their appearance that they're disinterested in the second tier of rugby. However, the board's job, just like any other job, was to respond to those new challenges. Here in Jersey, the cost of wages paid by Jersey Reds increased by 31% between 2020 and 2023. I don't know if that was due to wage rises, increased numbers of players, or a combination of both. Again, there is no narrative. During the same period, the contribution from the rugby union decreased by 77%. Yes, 77%, or as the proposer said, they slashed the income. So, an increase in wages of some £486,000, with a decrease of revenue from one source in the same period of £504,000. Sir, most organisations would have been looking at how to reduce their wage cuts rather than increasing them by a third. We are being asked today to support a company with experienced directors, a company that has known since at least June that they had issues, and probably, I'd suggest, long before then. Sir, I have seen, and I'm sure all members have seen, just how hard the chairman has worked, putting in countless hours to keep the business going. If you could have monetised his enthusiasm, we wouldn't be here today. When I say the company has experienced directors, I include in that, sir, one who's actually a chair of one of our arm's length organisations, and also a former chair of that company's risk committee. That's the level of experience, alongside 2 very successful local business people. As experienced directors, they would all know their responsibilities. Being a director comes with great responsibility. You cannot pass that off when your decisions come back to bite you. One of the employees on ITV last week said he'd been here for just 3 weeks. Given the Santander paper, I'll let members think about that for a second. We knew in June, and someone was employed in September. In addition to the financial help that the government have given, how many members are aware that the company doesn't have to apply for an individual licence when they want to employ a new player? A player whose wages, we are now told, wouldn't normally warrant a licence. I'm sure many members have, like me, tried to assist small local businesses in trying to obtain a licence so they can either just continue or grow. You'll be aware of how challenging this can be. But successive governments have supported Jersey Reds in what is a very practical way and a way that we should continue to do. Nottingham Rugby have a phrase, work, train, play. And that could have been and could still be an option for Jersey, where people work part-time, in industry, and play part-time. We're unlikely to win the championship, but we could still be competitive and keep our place in the league. I'm aware that some players coming to the end of their career have been helped by local businesses, but it appears that the strategic decision of the board was to plough on with a full-time professional outfit. And the proposer says that he's not aware of where they've done things wrong. Well, there's an example, sir. The strategic direction of the organisation has not changed. And having read with interest the Santander paper, sadly, despite the challenges, it appears the strategy just remains more of the same. Today we should have been looking at options, and the board surely will have explored these and other options. But the paper, entitled Business Model Review, attached to the proposition is for the status quo with potential increased funding from the rugby union. Looking at the income, the forecast for the next 3 years, there's a forecast for a 35% in gate receipts and a 46% increase in surplus on bar trading account. Perhaps the proposer can explain how both of these would be achieved. Deputy Teddier just spoke about pride. Well, sir, I was watching TV on Saturday and I was incredibly proud. Our local cricketers were on Sky TV not once but twice. Obviously very proud that we beat the old enemy, but incredibly proud that they've reached the finals of their particular competition. And they continue to do incredibly well, as do footballers, netballers, and a whole range of sports people. So I would encourage members to read the BBC post I referred to earlier from Cornish Pirates, an example of how a business has kept their employees and its supporters informed of the challenges they face. That, sir, I would say, is how to do it. If the business case is as strong as the Deputy suggests, and there's such a long-term opportunity, then let private investment invest. Thank you, sir.
Conor Thomas, St Mary.
Thank you, sir. And in case it should be deemed an injustice, I declare that I bought a season ticket the morning of the Exeter Chiefs match. I regret I did. I well understand or more than reluctance, the intention of the Council of Ministers not to advance further monies, and I agree that it would be throwing good money after bad if matters were left as they are, but I wish to speak early to gauge their interpretation and allow them to come back to me on this as to how they see the proposition as now drafted. Thanks to the amendment, it is now subject to the provision of a business case by the organisation that qualifies the benefit of the club to the island and demonstrates that the organisation will remain operational for the 2013-2014 rugby season. My interpretation is if this proposition were passed, who determines whether the business case has been passed? Surely, I think would we not be handing it back to the relevant ministers? I agree with most of what Constable St John said as to alternative ways of funding the club. But if that is what the ministerial team wanted, can they not impose that on the club, or can the club not come back with ideas to get more in line with what the ministerial team wants? So, and it therefore follows that if it is the case that if it is the case that the value to the island does actually cover our investment in the club, then what is the downside to that? But it would have to be on the basis that it is demonstrated to council ministers and through them, I hope, the Assembly, that the club would remain in existence at the end of the season. And a few other comments I'd like to make. So the Deputy I is not here. That does seem to suggest that the ultimate success of the existence of the club depends on our achieving Premiership status. I'm not sure that is the case. There are clubs in the league. You take Ealing, who are our main rivals last year. Their average gate, I think, is 800. But they were vying for, well, yes, they would still hope for promotion. And I think they would have challenged the Premiership League if they had won the Championship, because they have the benefit of a backer who's got more money than perhaps our backers have. But there are other options. And I think the low, comparatively low gate we received on that day against Exeter was perhaps due to the fact that there were World Rugby matches being on the television. That was a more attractive entertainment for the afternoon. So I would not want us or the club to be downgraded on the result of, or by virtue of one particular gate receipt. And I have been the club over many years, and I've been there where we have 4,000 people to watch a game against Leicester, for instance, and I wouldn't discount that returning. The other aspect is, of course, the RFU's stance on this. I've been a regular visitor to the club and attended lunches at most home games over the last 10 years or so. The president of Visited Club makes a speech, and virtually every time he berates the RFU for their intransigence as to their model. I think they are a bit like an old tanker being tried to be turned, but there are possibly hopes that they might, and I would hope that this crisis that the Jersey Reds finds them in might cause them to put their foot on the accelerator, but the RFU are slow moving in this direction, and I would not wish any decision to be taken on the basis that further funds will be forthcoming. So back to my original point, sir, my interpretation of the proposition as now defined is that the ministers, whether it's Treasury Minister, Economic Development Minister and Assistant Minister for Sport, would have some say as to whether proper demonstration has been given as to the ability of the club to survive the season. So it is in their hands, but passing this proposition would at least give them the opportunity to have a further look. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Ferry.
Thank you, sir. Like the Constable of St John, my heart does go out to people who are mainly affected by this, being the 70 employees and coaches of the club who suddenly find themselves potentially becoming unemployed. But I'd like to add to that the support which is available within our community. So organisations like Citizens Advice can help with general advice issues and indeed housing issues. The Jersey Advisory and Conciliation Service would be able to help with employment issues. The Listening Lounge would be able to help with emotional and well-being support. And of course, Customer and Local Services would be able to help with benefits, including insolvency benefit, because if this funding doesn't come through and Jersey Reds file for bankruptcy or whichever route they decide to take, insolvency benefit would be available to those employees. So I just wanted to put on record, sir, that anyone affected by this directly, there is plenty of support in place, sir.
Conataba St Martin.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I have great sympathy for the players and the staff and the loyal supporters. What they are going through is appalling. But I do not believe that the demise of the Reds is the fault of the government or the states, but the fault does lie with the board, which appears to have been very profligate with investments, including taxpayers' money. Businesses and boards should not repeatedly, and I repeat the word repeatedly, rely on the government to bail them out. This is not fair on the players, the staff or the taxpayers, who it seems have so far supported the club with well over £2 million. I've heard so many times over recent days that the Reds are the beating heart of Jersey. This, I would argue, is a misnomer. The Reds' last crowd was 1,800, and this crowd of supporters, and the crowd of supporters appears to be decreasing. In Jersey, we have a population of 110,000 people. The number 1,800 is about 1.6% of the entire population. Sir, if my beating heart was operating at only 1.6%, then I would be dead. Sir, sadly, I suggest that far too much taxpayers' money is required to resuscitate the Reds. But genuinely, if the business plan is so good, hopefully private investors and the RFU will be there to bail them out. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Hull.
Thank you, sir. I think we are all proud of the Jersey Reds. They did amazingly well to win the league last season. We cheered them on. We congratulated them on Liberation Day. But recently, they've had funding reduced from 480,000 to 80,000. And having bailed them out in the past, I feel that we should bail them out for one more season, give them one more chance, and just hope that then they will do what the Constable of St John has suggested and go with the amendments made by Deputy Feltham and Deputy Scott. I'm really sad, sir. We've lost our mail plane. Banks are closing. Post offices are closing. But I stood for a better Jersey. I'm really proud that we're going to upgrade the Opera House. I'm really pleased that we're doing more for arts and culture. But I do think we need a professional rugby team. I saw the rugby team play in the past when they were youngsters and we had all Jersey players, but they got better. They went up 4 divisions, I believe, in 4 years. They did really well. And now the professionals are encouraging the youngsters. I was really surprised. I went up to the rugby club on a Sunday morning. I thought there was just one small pitch. But my goodness, there are many, many pitches with youngsters of all ages playing rugby. And they want to aspire to get into the professional team if they can. They're really encouraged. We had the Lions coming over to train, and my little grandson got a shirt that had names of all the players. He was really proud to meet them. So I just implore everybody, I know it may not have been well managed, but let us show that this island support our professional team, and please let us carry on for one more season, because I think it will change. I think we're going to have a Premier League 1 and a Premier League 2, and I think there are negotiations for more money to come into it. But I really ask that we do a good thing and support them, these players, for one more season. That's all I ask, sir. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. And I want to start with an apology related to something I said earlier during questions without notice when I did mention a Jersey player in the Jersey Reds squad. And it wasn't my intention to make this personal in any way or to comment negatively on those individuals, and actually regardless of where they come from. They have my absolute respect and, of course, my sympathy for the position that they currently find themselves in. I was asked about the elite sports strategy and whether it linked to Jersey Reds, and my answer was that strategy, which is under development, is designed to make it easier for islanders to realise their sporting potential at elite levels should they have the talent. It's not being designed to support already professional players who move to the island to do a job, albeit a very good one. Moving on, much has been said already today, and I don't intend to repeat much of it. The Economic Development Minister has clearly set out in his statement the process up to this point and why the Council of Ministers could not support ongoing financial support for Jersey Reds. I share the Minister's significant concerns and could not have stood by and watched public money be spent in this way. And I do not support this Assembly effectively writing a blank cheque to continue to fund what is, if we're being really honest, a failing and very badly run business. And I have no doubt that if more funding is granted, there will be further requests, sooner rather than later. History shows this is likely to be the case. And I'd just like to provide some context about my own involvement. The Minister has explained that I met 2 representatives of Jersey Reds in November last year. I attended with an officer and we discussed various matters related to the club and its ambitions. The director of rugby for the club joined for part of the meeting. I was relatively new to the role and it was billed as an introductory meeting to come and chat about the club's position, aspirations, and it did touch on finances. Yes, they told me lots about how they were signing up various high-value residents to commit certain amounts of money. I believe that the comment was made that they were kind of halfway there and they hoped to have the others secured by the end of the year. So any suggestion from Deputy Farnham that it was made very clear that there were financial struggles at that point is completely untrue. In the months after, I went to watch Jersey Reds. I was interested in what they were up to. There's absolutely no suggestion that there was me not supporting Jersey Reds at any point. I was there when they lifted the championship trophy at my own expense, I should add, and not in the clubhouse. I had, however, attended a match previously as hospitality. And we did continue to engage as per the Economic Development Minister's statement earlier. You've all received the letter that I sent to them in January and have the details of further engagement from there. Deputy Farnham referred in his speech to arm's length organisations, and he appeared to compare Jersey Reds to Digital Jersey and Jersey Sport. Well, I now realise why at one stage, when I was looking into previous relationships with Jersey Reds, while the Deputy was Economic Development Minister, Jersey Reds is referred to in an official document as an arm's length organisation. Jersey Reds are absolutely not an arm's length organisation, nor have they ever been or should they be. And certainly they shouldn't be without the agreement of this Assembly. And my understanding is that in the UK, where of course Jersey Reds play, so it is a relevant comparison in this case, there are rules in place against government funding professional sports clubs in this way. And while I'm correcting some of Deputy Farnham's claims, I'd just like to point out that while absolutely valued and important, the Jersey Reds players who coach the amateur sides and the minis and juniors are paid for their time. The amateur club has private agreements in place with these players. They do not provide hours for free via the Jersey Reds. Quite rightly, members have asked what changed so that ministers felt able to support the emergency payments. Put simply, and for my part, the involvement of Santander, which we must remember is a company which gives an awful lot to sport in Jersey, and it does support many clubs and sports in lots of different ways, not just rugby. We had an opportunity to try to work together to see if a solution could be found, while at the same time seeking to protect against an unstructured collapse of the company. I was open to exploring the options, which we did. The now amended proposition asks for a business case to be provided by the organisation which quantifies the benefits of the club to the island and demonstrates that the organisation will remain operational for the 2023-2024 season. We've been there, asked for that, assessed it, challenged it, scrutinised the figures, and found it to be inadequate. We do not need to do that again. There are significant holes in this business case from Santander. It relies on a series of significant assumptions, despite being asked to only include guaranteed funding in future forecasts. It assumes significant payments from the RFU. Those payments are, at this stage, a hope. There is no evidence to show that this will be the case. It assumes that there will be significant cash injections from investors. I've seen no evidence of such investors in recent months. Instead, quite the opposite. Investors have been withdrawing support, including, it would seem, one of the principal investors. And most worrying of all for me, as the Assistant Minister with responsibility for sport, is that it makes all kinds of assumptions about the use of land and buildings that are not even owned by Jersey Reds. Those buildings and land are owned by the Jersey Rugby Football Club, the amateur club. Yet Santander assume all the money raised by the activities on them would be ploughed into Jersey Reds. And it's my understanding that that amateur club only learned about some of those assumptions when Deputy Farnham published his proposition. Do we know would they be happy to support these proposals? I don't believe they've been asked. Government officers have also sought to verify some of the financial claims contained within the document about other Championship rugby clubs, which aim to provide context for the spending by Jersey Reds. They found them to be vastly overinflated, to the point that I understand some named in the document may have something to say more widely about being misrepresented in this way. If we agree to fund Jersey Reds this season, we will, as Deputy Farnham admits, be writing a blank cheque. Be writing a blank cheque to a private company run by directors whose behaviours in recent months, I think we've heard so far over the course of today, we'd probably describe as questionable at best. Is that a responsible use of public money? And I have to say, I'm uncomfortable with this idea that government financial support will unlock investment from others. Given some of the things that we have heard in this assembly today, do we want to be encouraging well-intentioned people and companies to invest in this business? I'm not sure that I do. If the business case is as compelling as some would have you believe, why haven't other investors been interested in providing support? Why has, as I say, one of the club's biggest backers decided he doesn't want to contribute anymore? And why does Santander, which Deputy Farnham has shown has produced the business case, not offered to support the club financially? I asked that last question during one of the meetings with the bank as part of this process a few months ago. Because it's too risky, is the answer I was given. The bank said it would be willing to invest in a 3G pitch, but not in the club itself. That, to me, is telling indeed. Why, then, is it okay to take such a risk with public money, taxpayers' money? I don't believe it is. And this matter is not just divisive within this assembly, it's divisive in the world of sport too, and even for some within the local rugby scene as well. Many sports feel overlooked and like they're second best to Jersey Reds. Indeed, it sounds like Deputy Farnham thinks they are as well. Jersey Reds are our rugby team, he said. They're actually one of 3 clubs in the island. We've all seen the supporters for Jersey Reds in the Royal Square today, and I believe there may be some up in the public gallery this afternoon. What members haven't seen are the many messages of support I've received from other sports and individuals connected to them. They, like all of us, I'm sure, absolutely do not want to see the loss of Jersey Reds. They have huge respect for what the players have achieved, but they feel let down over many years when it comes to funding for sport. They felt ignored, overlooked, and like second-class citizens. They too bring economic benefits to Jersey, but no one has ever worked to try to promote what that is or tried to put a figure on it. They bring visitors to Jersey, fly the flag for our island around the world, and generate economic benefit. They have significant social benefit too, providing opportunities for our young people to be active, to inspiring our sports stars of the future, providing regular opportunities for islanders to watch and enjoy sport. And many receive just £40 towards a trip away once a year, if that. I'm working to try to address those challenges, It's not easy and it's not simple. And in order to do it properly, we need to get right to the core of some of these issues. And that takes time. This is what the ongoing review into the sports delivery landscape is in the process of doing. That will be published soon, and we can begin to correct the mistakes which have let down many in our sporting community over many years, including on the watch of Deputy Farnham. Sir, Deputy Farnham has described this as a sound financial investment, despite very clear evidence to the contrary. He says it isn't millions of pounds, just hundreds of thousands of pounds. Yet he admits it's a blank cheque. This is not how I understand my responsibilities as an elected member of this state's assembly when it comes to spending public money.
Conor Harbison Taylor.
May I just ask a very quick point of clarification from the previous speaker?
Only if the previous speaker gives way for a point of clarification.
No, sir.
Conor Harbison Taylor.
Thank you, sir. And the Assistant Minister does not mince her words, describing, amongst other things, Jersey Reds as a badly run business. I do have a confession to make, though, sir, to start with. From my rugby playing days, members may realise as they look at me that I have the build of a rugby player. But I remember one school report when I was playing on the wing that said I had an impressive turn of speed, especially when running away from the ball. So I'm perhaps not the best person to comment on this particular sport, though I am enjoying the Rugby World Cup, and I sense a lot of excitement in the community about the way rugby has really, world rugby has taken off. And maybe that's just an indication of why a lot of islanders are so proud that Jersey is part of that world, and so we're certainly moving into that world. So I do commend Deputy Farnham for bringing this proposition. He has skin in the game. When he was supporting as Economic Development Minister the Super Triathlon on the waterfront, I remember being quite sceptical about the sums of money that were being dished out to bring these elite athletes over to Jersey, until I went down to the waterfront and I got talking to some of these visiting athletes, names that I was familiar with from the TV. I didn't go as far as asking for their signatures, but it was good occasionally to be photographed with the Brownlee brothers and people like that. And what really struck me about these athletes was not so much the occasion itself, but the fact that they were all so bowled over by Jersey, and they were intent on bringing back their families to visit us. I was also struck, and I'm always struck when I talk to people about Jersey, by the lack of awareness of where we are, of what we do. There is still a real job to be done to put Jersey on the map with tourists, and I think that's something that the Jersey Reds have been doing remarkably well. I know the Super Triathlon stopped. Some of these things do stop, but I don't believe that investment in the brand of Jersey, in what Jersey offers to tourists, was wasted. I think many good memories, many good associations were forged by Deputy Farnham's work. And so I think he's the right person to be reminding us today of the enormous, incalculable benefits that having Jersey in this league is bringing the island. It is a sad point, I think, and some opponents of this proposition have spoken very well about the facts and figures, the pounds and pence. But the fact is, when I look up over St Helier of an evening and I see those orange planes coming in, it lifts my spirits. And I know that money was given to enable that to happen. Of course, it had to be. But the fact is, we now have those cheap flights to and from Jersey that for years islanders complained they didn't have. And I suspect that quite a lot of those seats are being taken by people who are coming to watch the Jersey Reds home games, or people going to the UK to watch the Jersey Reds play away. So EasyJet, for me, if I may use the word, EasyJet is almost a symbol of the fact that you have to spend money to get your place, like Jersey, on a very crowded stage as a tourism, as a holiday destination. Not enough people have spoken about the importance of tourism for Jersey's varied economy. And I think it's a shame that we don't, I've said this before, we don't have a tourism minister. We don't have someone who's constantly standing up and bemoaning the loss of hotels, the threat to our air links, the threat to our ferry links. We need every visitor we can get. And I believe that supporting Jersey Reds, as is being asked for by the Minister, with the caveats that have been helpfully provided by the amendment, particularly from Deputy Feltham, I think that is an investment worth making. And it remains to be seen what happens after that. But I believe there will be evidence, there will be economic value that can be shown, perhaps when the Public Accounts Committee gets to grips and has a look at that to see what kind of investment has paid off. I fear, sir, that given the tenor of many of the speeches, we are going to spoil the ship for a ha'porth of tar. And I would urge members to support Deputy Farnham. Thank you, sir.
Conor Tarbison-Clement.
Thank you, sir. I'm not ready to write the obituary for Jersey Reds, unfortunately, contrary to the Council of Ministers' wishes, because I do see hidden benefits. You call it invisible earnings in the city. And the invisible earnings is the flying the flag of the island of Jersey. It's the pride that we have in all of our sporting teams that are so successful. And we can see now that the Council of Ministers are now beginning to recognise the value of investing in sport in general. The Jets don't get enough money. The hockey club doesn't get enough money, the cricket, etc., etc. And we can see that that is going to be sorted out very soon, I hope. But the problem is we've got a situation now where we know that the investment that we've made, and it is an investment, it's either an investment or a loss. We're going to make our decision this afternoon. Are we going to lose this money, or are we going to take a risk under new rules to try and reinvent the game? I'm heartened by the fact that we have amendments that says that this is just support until the end of season 23-24. But we will want better records and better accounting for the investment that we make. And we'll be able to come back to the States Assembly to see where we are. I'm also heartened by Deputy Scott's amendment that says we should insist on having individuals on the board. It is quite clear that this investment has not been looked after, neither by the Council of Ministers historically, or the previous governments historically, nor by the very well qualified board of the Jersey Rugby Club. Who would not tell their players, who are actually getting paid minimum wage for the qualifications that they hold? Many of the rugby footballers over here playing rugby at £25,000 a year are very highly qualified professional individuals. A lot of them have degrees. A lot of them are playing rugby whilst they can in the youth, so they move on to their professional qualifications, maybe in the city or where have you, thereafter. So they are invested as well in the island of Jersey, because they could go off to the city now and earn their £70,000 to £150,000 a year. They don't want to do that because, one, they love rugby. Two, that's a future game. That's a future situation. So we're all invested here. And I need to remind everybody here present that if we close this down now, 70 people will immediately lose their jobs. What would we do if that was a Jersey company, an arm of Jersey? We know that we've let building companies fall by the wayside, but they have been all re-employed. This isn't going to happen. These gentlemen have missed the boat, the seasonal boat. They're not going to be able to find jobs in the leagues from now on because everybody's been signed up. So we're all invested. I do take a bit of heart also from the figures and the projections. Now, we can all say it's worth this, it's worth this, that, and the other. But I also have to point out that people come back to Jersey for many, many years to come. Once they've landed on our beautiful island, they're smitten. And I know that relationships have struck over many years, friendships are made, families are even spawned, if for want of a better word, out of the influx of people that come over here, both professionally for work and also for sport. And I wouldn't like to see that go. So I think in captions, sir, I'd like to say that we are all invested. We either throw that away, or with the new set of accounts and the accounting system that we hope to produce, we tell the Jersey board, as professional as they are, because I'm very disappointed in them, that this is their last chance. You either sort it out now, or you're gone forever. In the meantime, 70 people retain their jobs. We will have their income to pay tax, rent, food, a little bit of drink, perhaps, and we can go forward to future seasons. The alternative is we just lose the money that we've invested. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Felton.
Thank you, sir, and I'm very pleased to follow the previous speaker because I couldn't agree with him more. And I'd also like to thank Deputy Scott for her helpful amendment because I think that helps with governance as well. And I am pleased to support the proposition as amended by myself as well. I want to talk a bit about responsible grant giving. And I speak as somebody that has a lot of experience having run grants programs for the creative industries in Australia for 10 years. Some of those grants going to companies, some of those grants going to not-for-profits, some of those grants going to financially precarious organisations. And yes, there were instances in which we did have to take funding away from organisations because they were at risk. And I think that's why I was so appalled when I heard the news about what has happened with the Jersey Reds, because I think as soon as a government becomes involved in funding an organisation, they also have a responsibility to that organisation. The people that work for that organisation, the people that support that organisation, and the people that use that organisation's services, as well as a responsibility for using taxpayers' money wisely and efficiently. So I was so alarmed because what it struck me is it looks like the government in the last tranches of funding funded this organisation to fail rather than to succeed. There seems to be a real lack of strategic decision-making within the Council of Ministers about funding. And I agree with Deputy Farnham when he said actually that there appears to be a lot of ad hoc grant giving. And that is actually unhealthy, and that does lead to situations like this. And it is a big risk, and I hope that ministers will take that on board and actually look at how they give grants into the future, so that we are ensuring that when we give grants to organisations, we're giving grants in a sustainable manner and in a manner that actually delivers the best value for islanders. And it's that best value for islanders that I also want to raise, because in all of the ministers' comments so far that we've heard today, both in question time, in the public statements, and in their speeches during this debate, I've not heard any evidence that they have done an analysis of the cost benefits. And when I think in the context, particularly that economic development, this isn't the only organisation that economic development gives a grant to. Many of the organisations that get grants from economic development, in fact, would not be sustainable without those grants. So I actually think that some of the comments made by ministers today about the organisation that we're talking about, the Jersey Reds, actually could be quite damaging. And if I was one of the other organisations that potentially is in receipt of a grant from government, I might be quite worried and concerned about the things that government ministers may say about my organisation. But one of the reasons why I am pleased to support this proposition is that I do think it would give time for a more strategic direction into the future. And perhaps I'd like to invite ministers to do an analysis of the cost and benefits of providing funding to the Jersey Reds compared to other organisations that receive funding from economic development. And as I said, many of those organisations may be unsustainable without it. I'd also like to see ministers do an objective assessment against the minister's own priorities. So, for example, the future economy strategy. Where does the Jersey Reds sit within our want and need for a diversified economy? I was surprised when the Assistant Minister with responsibility for sport said that she felt that the Jersey Reds didn't have a part to play within the elite sports strategy. I have the ministerial plan in front of me here, and it quite clearly states that one of the purposes of the elite sports strategy is to look at how it would enrich the local economy and promote Jersey internationally. The Jersey Reds may well tick both those boxes. The Assistant Chief Minister mentioned the need to undertake research around the value of sport. Well, according to the Ministerial Delivery Plan, that research should have been finished in Q1 2023. So we should now, had ministers done the work that they said they were going to do, be in a position where we could actually assess the value that this funding would be giving. But to come back to why I was happy to follow the previous speaker, I am concerned about the risks of losing the team at this point in time. The risks potentially to other parts of our economy, the potential loss of income to hospitality sector, and as the Constable said, you know, the potential impact on the airlines that provide very much needed services to our island. We need to keep them going. And also, one of the other priorities of ministers was event-led tourism. So to me, that's another box of the ministerial priorities that this funding could well tick. So I would urge members to support this proposition. It's not a blank cheque, thanks to the amendments that have been made. It is quite usual for governments who are providing grant funding to require governance changes if they are required. And I would encourage ministers to put those kind of conditions into any kind of funding contract where required. And also look really, really carefully at the conditions that are being placed on organisations when grants are being awarded. And perhaps there has been a lack of such conditions in the past. And had grants been managed more effectively, we may not be in this position now. So I think what we all need to do is see this as an opportunity to see if there is a sustainable and a viable way forward for the Jersey Reds, and I encourage members to support this proposition.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Miller.
Thank you, sir. I should start by saying, of course, I have enormous sympathy for the players and the coaching staff and all of this. It's undoubted. I'm not a rugby follower or a rugby fan particularly, but there's no doubt that they have worked very hard to achieve great success for the island. It seems to me that the issue here is, again, the word that we hear regularly in this assembly. It's a failure of governance, and that has to sit at the door of those running the club. And unlike our previous two speakers, I'm not entirely sure that the amendments help. I struggle to understand how they're going to work. If we have a business plan that shows the club is not viable, how much massaging and tweaking of figures can happen to make it appear viable without input from government or investors who are not running forward at the moment. I don't understand how that business plan is going to appear that does say it's viable when it clearly isn't, and I don't see how that business plan can be done very, very quickly. So I'm slightly confused at producing but if we already have a business plan that says the club is struggling, how a new business plan can possibly say anything else. And if that new business plan does say it's never going to make it, what do we do then? Do we just keep putting money in? Everywhere I go, there are organisations telling me they need money, and my sympathies are much more with those organisations and what they do than, I'm sorry, with Jersey Reds, which is a sport, and I don't discount the value of sport across our community, but there are groups and other entities and organisations that contribute very much more to this island who are all in real terms than a sports club. I'm sorry to say that. I'm also concerned about Deputy Scott's proposition, which asks for two things. I'll touch the independent advisor first. What board in this condition, of any organisation in this condition, would not already have financial expert advisors? They have relied on their bank, and it would appear, rather than going and seeking accountancy financial advice, is that what Deputy Felton would have expected of organisations to which she would give grants? It's for the board to obtain financial appropriate advice. I'm not quite sure what an independent advisor is going to look like. Is that an expert accountancy firm? And who's going to pay for it? Because that will cost a huge amount of money. Is it a local businessman with some experience in running businesses? Because we are presently looking at a company which would appear to be verging very closely towards insolvency. We will not find a businessman to step forward and act as an advisor to a potentially insolvent company because of the risks of insolvent trading and becoming a shadow director. There is a fine line between advising and becoming a shadow director, and in particular, I would like to ask the Attorney General for his thoughts on how an independent advisor, how easy it would be for an independent advisor to become a shadow director. And thirdly, there's the same point about a Treasury and Resources representative. We have very experienced officers in Treasury and Resources. I have the greatest respect for them. They are very, very capable, but they are paid to advise government. I don't know how many of them have experience advising rugby clubs or private businesses. I'm sure some of them do, but they will face an impossible conflict of interest. Do they represent government's interests, or do they advise a club? And what do they do in the presence of conflict? And the same issue arises again, and I'd like the Attorney General to comment, please, on the risk of that representative also becoming a shadow director and subsequently becoming liable for insolvent trading if this company cannot be, if this business cannot be recovered in the very near future. Thank you, sir.
So you wish to ask a question of the Attorney General?
Yes, sir. I'd like him to comment on the issues of an independent advisor, where that person is an individual, the risks of that person being considered to be a shadow director, and how that person would then be exposed in the event of claims against a company in an insolvency.
Are you able to assist, Mr. Attorney?
Yes, sir, I am. So, in relation to the independent advisor, and indeed Deputy Scott's proposition also, I think, calls for a senior representative from the Treasury and Exchequer Department as basically being included in proceedings of the board of Jersey Reds. So the risk with that route, or that the proposition, or the amendment to the proposition that engages, is that a shadow director is, according to the Companies Law in Article 1 of the interpretation section of the Companies Law, a director is classified as a director, whatever they're called. So the law looks through the name of given that's to a director. So the fact that they may be called a representative or an independent representative doesn't matter from the law's perspective. They can be classified as a shadow director for the purposes of the Companies Law. And the consequence of that is that if the representative is in fact a shadow director, that potentially engages a risk of wrongful trading under Article 177 of the Companies Law. And Article 177 provides that a director can be responsible personally, have personal liability for any part of, or indeed all, of the company's debts or other liabilities in circumstances where they knew or ought to have known or were reckless that the company would be unable to avoid a creditor's winding up. So that does engage a significant potential risk, so the person could be responsible without any limitation of liability for all or any of the debts or other liabilities of the company. So in those circumstances, it would be very difficult to persuade a person to join the board, whether as a representative or properly called a director, in circumstances where they could have unlimited personal liability for all or any of the debts of or other liabilities of the company. And the further problem is that if the company is, from what we've seen, appears to be teetering on the brink of insolvency, and if in fact it were to fall into insolvency, whether that be by way of a creditor's winding up or possibly under the Desarts law, then the liquidator of the company would be obliged to look into the conduct of the affairs of the company via its directors to see if there had in fact been wrongful trading by the company under the guidance of the directors. So it would have a duty, the liquidator would have a duty to look into the conduct of the directors and see if there is the prospect of claims against the directors for wrongful trading. So I do caution members about the risk which potentially arises from the second amendment to the proposition, because it does potentially engage the possibility of whether it be a senior representative of Treasury Resources or possibly an independent representative of the business community becoming responsible for all or any of the debts without any limitation of liability for the entire debts of the company.
Deputy Scott,
Thank you, sir. Just a follow-up question to the Attorney-General. I wonder if the Attorney-General might expand on that in terms of what he knows in terms of case law and on shadow directors, in particular where you have somebody attending a company in an advisory capacity, whether that could, in fact, you have people like accountants, you have people like lawyers who may well attend a company and give advice in terms of their views on matters, and the extent to which that automatically would actually be regarded as somebody being a shadow director, and in that respect, perhaps the advice that might be given to people assuming such a role in terms of those particular distinctions, sir.
So yes, there's a distinction between, in my view, distinction between an advisor and someone who is a representative, and according to Deputy Scott's proposition or amendment, the purpose of her amendment is to provide sufficient review and control of subsequent amounts granted to the club. She talks of control, and when it comes to control, that clearly, to my mind, indicates a position that's suggestive of being a director rather than an advisor. So I'm not sure that the deputy's question is really of much assistance to her. I would say that in Article 177 that there is a qualification to the risk of personal liability, because it provides that the court shall not make an order under paragraph 1, which is the provision that raises personal liability, So the court shall not make an order with respect of a person if it's satisfied that after either condition specified in paragraph 2, and that's to do with the time when it became clear, or ought to have become clear, that there was no reasonable prospect of the company avoiding a creditor's winding up, that the court must first be satisfied that the person took reasonable steps with a view to minimising the potential loss to the company's creditors. So there is a defence there that the person can take reasonable steps with a view to minimising potential loss to the company's creditors. But nevertheless, that the real question is this representative on the board? Is it a director or not? Is he or she a director or not? And the law is concerned with the substance of the activities of that person. And there's a distinction between an advisor and someone who is really a shadow director.
Yes,
So just one more question. So the Attorney General, in analysing this, referred to the contents of my report rather than the contents of the proposition, indicating that the intention, perhaps, as read from the report, related to the activities of the advisor, but indeed that's not actually in the proposition. So the report actually did make a statement that funding needs to be, that you need to be given reduced oversight and controls in place. So the advisor could actually just be advising on what the advisor sees in that respect. That could be a distinction. I just wondered if the attorney could confirm that.
Sir, it's correct that the use of the word control is in the report rather than the proposition itself, but the word control is a significant one, as I made the point earlier. The purpose of this amendment is to have the ability to control the actions of the board. It seems to me that that's the purpose of this amendment, to give control and oversight. And in those circumstances, there's going to be a risk that the person exercising control and oversight is in fact a shadow director rather than an advisor. And the law looks at what happens in fact. It looks through names and it looks through terminology and what has happened in fact. And that's always going to be a risk if this person is going to be exercising oversight and control.
I have the lights on from Deputy Farnham, Deputy Feltham, Deputy Morell. Am I assuming these are all further questions for the Attorney General? Deputy Farnham, you were up first.
Thank you, sir. I understood the amendment was to provide some additional oversight on behalf of the Treasury and some advice. I didn't envisage any people sent in that capacity to become board members or exercise control, but just to ensure and monitor processes and such forth. That's my understanding. So my question to the AG, if that is the case, and they weren't to join the board, and they were there to provide oversight of the processes, is that still is there still that element of risk of personal liability?
Yes, there is. Oversight is control. So in those circumstances, there is the prospect of that person being seen by the law as a shadow director. It may be that there can be some documentation drafted as to the exact remit of this particular person, but if the purpose of this amendment is to exercise oversight and control, that is necessarily going to engage the risk of that person being seen as a shadow director.
Deputy Feltham.
Thank you, sir. I read this as oversight and control over the funding. When it comes to significant grant funding, it is likely that it is paid out in tranches. So my reading of the wording of the report to the amendment, would it be control over when funding is paid? If it was control of a Treasury official based on the information it had about funding, does that carry the same risk?
Tony?
Well, sir, in terms of the way that the report is read, yes, it does use the word. It first says review and control any subsequent amounts granted to the club. And the purpose of that is so that they need to be made with due oversight and controls in place. Now, so the exact ambit of that, the oversight and controls over how key funding, emergency funding to the club is going to be spent, that is still a very significant function of that person or persons, whether they be a senior representative from the Treasury and Exchequer Department or an independent representative from the business community. That person is in a position to control how the funding is to be used. And in a situation where the club is critically dependent on this funding, that is a very significant position of power in terms of how the company conducts its affairs. So I come back to the point that if this route is pursued, there is a risk that that person will be considered a shadow director for the purposes of the law.
Mr. Tony, it would be unusual for me to pose a question, but it is a matter for me to interpret the meaning of the proposition itself as opposed to the legal underpinnings of it. If one considers the wording of the proposition alone as amended and not the report that underpins it, do you have the same concerns?
Sir, I accept that the wording of the proposition is key, and the wording of the proposition is a matter for you, sir. So the wording of the proposition does not use the word control. But nevertheless, my point remains that whether you call them a senior representative or an independent representative, the fact that they're not being called a director does not necessarily mean that there is not a risk of them being classed as a shadow director for the purposes of the law.
Deputy Scott, you're next scheduled to speak. Did you have a further question for the attorney?
Just one more question for the Attorney General. So I'm understanding that in terms of the interpretation that you have taken, so that you are effectively adding the words at the end of the sentence of the report that need to be made with due oversight and controls in place by the advisors. Because basically, this wasn't my intention. You are reading a different...
No,
sorry.
You can ask the attorney for advice. You can't argue with the attorney about the advice he's giving.
Sorry, sir. So this is an inferment. Are you actually saying that in order to interpret this proposition, you need to infer into this report a suggestion that it's the advisors who are giving the due oversight and controls in place, as opposed, because you have the words if has been used a lot, and it seems that the word if is extending. Is that the actual what you are saying? If you were to interpret this report in a way that it actually influenced the interpretation of the proposition and actually said it was the advisors who should be giving the oversight and controls in place, which it doesn't, that would be the risk.
Sarah, I'm not sure that
this latest question causes me to alter my previous answers given to previous questions. I'm not inferring any words into the proposition. All I'm saying is that from a legal perspective, the inclusion of senior representatives or independent representatives on the board of Jersey Reds does engage a potential risk of them being seen by the law as shadow directors. And if the club were to go into insolvency proceedings, that does necessarily engage a potential risk of them incurring personal liability for wrongful trading. And that can be for all of the debts of the company and all of its liabilities.
I was just going to say, it might help before I propose the adjournment. I wondered if there were many members who wish to speak.
Yes, I think what I propose to do is firstly identify how many members still wish to speak on this proposition. And also, if there are further questions for the attorney, we will pose them now and the attorney can advise tomorrow morning, having had the opportunity to reflect upon matters. So firstly, on the first question, I'm not going to write these names down as an order of speaking, but could you put your lights on if you have not yet spoken but intend to speak? Well, I have 4 at least who are intending to speak. 5, 6.
So may I propose the adjournment?
Well, there are 6 members who are wishing to speak. Before you propose the adjournment, can we take what the questions for the attorney might be so that he can think about them overnight? Would that be fair use of the attorney's time? Deputy Morell, you had a question for the attorney?
Yes, sir, thank you. Sir, I've already had representations from accountable officers concerned about the implications of this amendment to the amendment, sir. And so I was wondering if the Attorney General could report back tomorrow on this subject of conflict of interest in terms of accountable officers' duties under the Public Finances Law / manual and their roles that would be on this board, and whether their need to represent the club would conflict with that, because this is something that's been an issue, as well as I've also had representations about the liability they may face as well. Thank you, sir.
Senator Harbison-Brillard, a question for the attorney?
Yes, sir, thank you. I wonder if the attorney in the morning could confirm the status of the Jersey Red Company and the existing liabilities of the directors. Thank you, sir.
No, I can't do that. That's a question of fact and not a question of law. I don't know what the liabilities of the company are.
What I'm trying to establish, sir, is whether the status of the company is still trading or not, and I don't know where that information might come from.
Well, I think if it's a legal question, the attorney will attempt to answer it. If not, it'll have to be answered by the proposer of the proposition. If no one else is going to speak who has the answer themselves. Deputy Scott, did you have a question for the attorney?
Sir, just one more follow-up with the Minister's question, which is, when giving the advice regarding the conflict of interest, could there be a comparison with the position where you have a member of Treasury on the board of advising on state-owned entities? Thank you.
Question for the attorney, Ms.
It's a procedural point, sir. I don't know if I should ask afterwards, but it's to do with a matter of order.
Very well. Did you have a question for the attorney?
I guess it was an extension of what Deputy Scott asked, that civil servants and officers are often in attendance, not as members, but in attendance, provide guidance and observe many arm's-length organisations and boards. So does the same level of risk apply to those situations?
Deputy Balash?
I wonder if the greffier, perhaps over the course of the adjournment till tomorrow morning, would be kind enough to produce for members tomorrow a composite proposition, because I've tried to amalgamate the 2 amendments and the proposition and not entirely succeeded, and I'd be grateful if the greffier would apply his brain to this matter overnight.
I'm sure it's well within the greffier's talents. I have no doubt at all, Deputy Balash. Anyone else need to craft a question for the Attorney General to consider overnight? No, very well then. The adjournment is. Oh, Deputy Tadier, you had a question of order.
So it might be a question I could ask the Gref or yourself privately, sir, I think.
Very well. Let's leave it at that. And very well. The adjournment was proposed. The Assembly stands adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow morning.